Hello, sisters. So, just gonna ramble for a bit, explaining what the fuck I'm doing, and why I'm doing it. So, basically, I opened Twitter after, guys, it's like 8 p.m. I woke up at 4:30 this morning, went to my first job, streamed on here, went to my second job. I got home, I was like, I'm gonna chill out and relax. I opened Twitter. Is there a fucking thunderstorm outside? Dude, it's winter. Okay, well, I opened Twitter. Obviously, bad call. I saw all these clips of this fucking video, and I was like, what the hell is going on? And I was like, I should do a reaction video to that. Like, maybe... Oh, hey, Isla Lesbos. I was like, maybe I should do a reaction video to, like, that when I'm done the book I'm reading right now. I can make it, like, a Wednesday afternoon thing. Like, a day where I only have one job instead of two jobs. And then I was like, you know what? I want to do a reaction video to it right now. And I kind of think it's the perfect video for me to do a reaction to, for a few reasons. First of all, longtime viewers know I have a lot of criticisms of Stella O'Malley and her actions in general. And those of you who are here from Twitter might remember like that really big like Twitter space that she and I were in like 2 years ago, where she started like yelling at me. What did she say to me? She said, I have no soul or some insane shit, because I was like, we there can't be any gray area around like grooming, that it's like not okay. And then she was like, how dare you say this about my friend, or some, I don't know. The whole thing was crazy, but that was the last time I had an interaction directly with Stella O'Malley. Yeah, so I have beef with Stella O'Malley. However, well, beef. I also, one of the reasons I feel comfortable making this video is because, like, she is such a heavyweight and I'm a fucking no one. Like, I don't matter anymore since I became, like, so fucking man-hating online that I literally won't talk with men or interact with men at all, and block them on site, on all social media. I've kind of become irrelevant, which is, like, a fucking blessing. So I feel like I can just do whatever the fuck I want and no one's really gonna give a shit. Because, you know. Oh yeah, Beansprout says she said that she joined that very large Twitter space. I think it had like 600 people listening or something, to talk about AGP, not to talk about Artie Morty, which was BS. Yeah, because the whole point, like, it was like a pre-scheduled Twitter space that she and I agreed we were going to go into to talk about a specific thing. Anyway. Yeah, so what was my point? Oh yeah, I've kind of become irrelevant and she's like a heavyweight. So I'm like, I'll just say what the fuck I want. Like, it won't impact her or me in any way, honestly. Also, it's kind of the perfect thing for me to react to, because I'm constantly shit-talking these, like, gender-critical feminists who are actually gender traditionalists, who have no feminist class consciousness, who have no analysis. Like, one of my biggest issues with them is that, like, there's no logical consistency to any of their positions. Like, in a lot of ways, many of them are kind of like gender-critical trans people, in that, like, they say one thing and do the opposite. Oh yeah, it's pouring rain outside. It's gonna be so fucking icy. Yeah, so I'm kind of like, I don't like the person who made this video, but I like the position from the title, at least. I haven't watched the video ahead of time, so, like, we'll see. And as you know from, or you don't know, if depending on who you are, I like to do stuff like fresh. So whenever I read an article or a book or a video, like, I haven't like prepared at all. Like I said, I just like got home from my second job. I had some food. I was like, what's this thing on Twitter? Saw some clips. The handful of clips I saw, it was like, what the fuck? So, you know, here we are. All right. I haven't used StreamYard in like 2 years. So if there's like some kind of thing where you're like, Benji, we can't see this or hear this, or this is not working, tell me in the live chat. Okay. I think this is the best format. Yeah, that's kind of dumb, isn't it? That's the difference between that and that. Is this better? Oh, hey, Mabel, what's up? Let's start like this, yeah? I think you'll be able to hear the audio from it. Let's try. Oh yeah, one more thing. This video is like fucking long. Why are my roommates texting me? Yeah, everybody were like shocked because it's like February in Canada, it shouldn't be raining. This video, I think, is going to be super long and tedious. So I'm going to be the ADHD woman that I am and probably skip over shit that's boring. And if you want to watch the whole video yourself, it's linked in the description, obviously. Yeah, okay. Also, precursor, I have no idea who the fuck this guy is. You can't hear their audio? Great. Share screen, window, share audio. Share system audio. Okay. Now I've got a warning, like you're sharing screen audio. Okay, so I think thank you for bearing with me with this. Yeah, like I said, I haven't used StreamYard in like 2 years. And even when I did, I usually didn't do video reactions. Yeah, so like full disclosure, don't know who the fuck this guy is. So, and also he's a man. Probably gonna roast him. Okay.
Which is within the trans and the gender sort of orbit, there seems to be a contingent of people. I usually just think of them as gender critical feminists or sometimes self-described TERFs, but I'm curious if there's a different word that we could use to describe these people. But there's a contingent of people that seem to be really adamant about using very specific language, who ostensibly would be on our side or we'd be on their side. But in my view, they completely derail the conversation when it comes to, you know, not wanting to medicalize children, when it comes to keeping men out of women's spaces. And they're just so puritanical and it's so annoying. And I think that they're just doing so much harm to this movement.
Okay. Is this dude like a friend of hers that he was like, hey, do you want to come on my podcast so you can like advocate for your position in the current Twitter drama? Because that's how it feels to me right now. Like I said, I don't know who the fuck he is. I also think it's pretty funny that they're calling gender critical feminists, whatever that, I think she's about to define what that means in this context, puritanical. Because I'm like, hasn't there been all this drama? For those of you who don't know, I've been on a Twitter hiatus for like 8 months or something. I've opened it up a few times, and every time I open it, I scroll for like 30 seconds, and I'm like, oh, this all looks fucking depressing, and then I close it. But hasn't there been all this shit about how now there's like this rift between like those who will and won't use pronouns and like whether you're an ultra or not or whatever? So I'm like, to say that all gender critical feminists are puritanical and they're derailing the conversation. Okay, I'm like rambling. My issue is the generalization and the over grouping, because to me, like, there's a lot of factions doing a lot of different shit who don't like each other for different reasons, who have different history with each other. Also, like, apologies. I have like the audio filter on. I don't know if you can hear the thunder. It's like fucking loud. Okay.
And so I would just like to get your view. What would you call these people that are sort of in this bubble that are doing this stuff?
Well, it turns very into the people's front of Judea quite quickly when you get into this. But essentially, you could say that we will always owe a gift of thanks to the radical feminists who in many ways spotted issues around gender ideology and trans ideology really very early in the day, and they spoke up. And those radical feminists have a very definite viewpoint, and that would be, you know, to tear down the patriarchy, or certainly that the patriarchy is the root of an awful lot of problems. So there is that segment that.
Okay, I don't want to stop it like every 30 seconds because we'll be here for like 4 hours, but I just think that's like the most kind of basic to the point of irrelevancy comment she could have made. Like, so she knows she's about to start, this is what I think, she's about to start attacking the puritanical feminists. So she needs to like throw out a bone before she gets going. So she's saying, you know, the rad femmes called this, so like kudos to you guys. And then instead of mentioning anything to do with why radical feminists have a problem with gender, like, you know, gender roles as enforced based on sex, she's just like, because they don't like patriarchy. I believe the reason she's done that is because if she starts to actually explain in even 2 sentences why radical feminists don't like gender, she's going to have to, at some point, if she does that, at some point, she's going to say something that approves of gender roles, because in a lot of ways, she is kind of a gender traditionalist, at least at heart, even if she tries to pay lip service to not being one. So she doesn't want to contradict herself in the future. So she's given us like the most bland, basic, irrelevant description of that. I think it's on purpose. Like, she's planning ahead.
That have always been there, and they would come from a tradition where no platforming was certainly a very definite mode of operation, and that's how they worked. And they also worked in a world where I would argue, I'm sure I'll be corrected when I'm wrong.
Corrected, that's what they do. They correct you.
They correct you in a very censorious way.
Yeah.
Wait, okay. I wasn't sure, but then now she's just said censorious way. Is she trying to say that radical feminists have historically had so much power and such a mass of people involved that when we no platform someone, it has like a global impact and genuinely stop? Okay, I will not go on any media that has men on it or is hosted by a man. A lot of radical feminists, I think, fall along the spectrum of agreeing with that position. Like, we have never had, like, you know, large platforms of power or the ability to have huge impacts on large platforms of power by ourselves. So this is hilarious. And like, what she's doing right now is she's equating gender critical feminists, aka mostly gender traditionalists who are anti-trans, with radical feminists, and saying that they're all the same group. The number of gender critical anti-trans traditionalists far outweighs the amount of rad femmes on the internet right now. So like, what the fuck? Like, that's just very misleading.
It feels, and it's not just radical feminists. I'm going to move on to the many other groups, but that would be noticeable. And they do believe in no platforming, and they do seem to operate within a guilt by association way of thinking, and also that some words are forbidden and shouldn't be used.
Okay. I have so many things to say already. Okay, so first of all, they do believe in no platforming. Radical feminists have a handful of core beliefs, but like, I know radical feminists who have been like published in like far right media because in their country or their region, they're like the only people who will publish them. And like, I would disagree with that, and they would have friends who disagree with that, but I wouldn't say you're not a radical feminist because you're censored so badly you went to the only person who would publish you. So like, this entire concept of like, it's a black and white issue, that's factually incorrect. This whole thing of there's words you shouldn't use. I challenge you to find a radical feminist author who does not use language that we all find like super fucking offensive. Like, I'm thinking of Dworkin, off the top of my head. I can't think of any author who hasn't used words like, you know, like whore, or like, I don't know, they use sometimes really graphic language to describe like the sexual inequality between males and females. And it's super offensive. And none of us are like, oh, well, that's not a feminist, we can't read her work anymore. Like, I don't know. And if your radical feminist beliefs are really hardcore, then it's almost impossible to not interact on a daily basis with people who use language that you find super offensive. And you just kind of like get used to interacting with people that you find offensive and knowing that you can't like stop them. So it's just, I don't know what the fuck she's talking about.
On top of that, there's also gender critical feminists who mightn't be radical feminists, but they're certainly gender critical. And they seem to fall in with a lot of that. They seem to fall in with no platforming, guilt by association, and censoring of words and statements and thoughts. And I don't come from that background. I don't actually.
What does she mean censoring? Because, like, to me, when you use the term censorship, you're trying to say that someone has, like, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Institutional power. Like, if someone had the power to decide what and doesn't get published in an academic setting, or what does and doesn't get published in, like, a news setting, that would be like someone who has the power to censor. Rad femmes are just, like, tweeting about shit and writing to their MPs or whatever. Like, she's vastly overstating this.
I think feminism as a theory is very psychological, and I'm very psychologically minded. I think it's very.
That's the other thing too. Maple's like, aren't radical feminists pretty pro freedom of speech? Yeah, it's kind of a nuanced position, because, like, freedom of speech absolutists believe in, like, you know, the extreme misogyny being accepted as free speech. So, like, stuff like snuff porn or whatever, like, that should be covered under free speech. Obviously, radical feminists don't believe, we're not free speech absolutists. There's, like, you know, but in general, we're pro free speech, absolutely. I don't know any radical feminist who is like, hey, that gender critical journalist who uses preferred pronouns, they should be banned from ever publishing ever again. Like, that's not. We're just like, well, we don't agree with them, but they should say what they have to say, and then we can disagree with them based on what they've said. Like that. Yeah, I agree, Maple. Thank you.
Sociological, but I don't think it actually brings in the human psyche in a way that satisfies me. And then there's a third group, arguably, which is the gender criticals. And they're neither feminists or radical feminists. They're just gender critical.
Sure.
They're critical about the ideology. And they're three different groups that are kind of coexisting in a quite uncomfortable manner with other people, such as, let's say, classical liberals like myself, with conservatives, with the Kelly J. Keane group, who call themselves feminists, as far as I know, with religious people.
Okay, so right now she's trying to position herself as, like, I know all the factions and why they're doing what they're doing and all this shit. The fact that she's used the term gender critical a lot, and she's also differentiated that there's gender critical feminists and gender criticals who are not feminists, without defining what the difference is between those groups. To me, that's like, how are you going to talk for the next hour and 6 minutes about this? Okay. Play.
So we all agree on the basic, which is pediatric medical transition is not advised. It feels like a very dangerous thing. And we all agree that, women's safe spaces should be protected, whether that's in sport or prisons or wherever, that should be protected. So we can all agree on that, and we almost disagree on everything else.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's so many different ways to go there. It's sad to me because I'm very new to this world. I've only been sort of investigating it and making a documentary, as you know, about this subject. And so I've been studying it for about a year. And I guess I was just really blindsided by the amount of hate that I've gotten for having you in the show, having Buck Angel in the show. And it's interesting because it's those three groups that you mentioned, but it's also the conservative Christians, like the really very, very, I would say, ultra-conservative, probably right-wing Christians that also find themselves aligned with those, what I view as kind of far-left feminist types. They kind of come together on this topic.
Just the far-left feminist types. Ooh, it's fucking what the fuck, bro?
Because they both, let's say, don't like Buck, or they both, want to police, at least some of them want to police the pronouns you use, which someone did that to me on Instagram.
Okay, so this guy just said one of the factions is the far-right, ultra-conservative religious people. Then he's now throwing out terms like policing, like he's throwing out terms that the conservatives use to, like, dog whistle or whatever, like SJWs. He called us far left. Is he trying to say that we're basically just SJWs? That's what it seems to me like he's doing right now. And yeah, I don't think Stella O'Malley said feminist. I don't think Stella. Oh my god, I don't think Stella O'Malley said that Posey Parker is a feminist. I think she said feminist because of her Irish accent, and she said it very fast. I think it kind of sounds like feminist. I scrolled through the comments before I started the stream. So people were saying, like, debating over that. Yeah. Also, I just think it's funny that, like, the reason that conservatives don't like Buck Angel is the opposite of the reason that radical feminists don't like Buck Angel. And he's just like all those people who hate Buck Angel. I'm like, that so far my number one issue, way overgeneralization and misleading.
Instagram the other day, and I was like, I said, don't you realize that you're doing exactly what the trans activists are doing? And she's like, oh, well, you know, this is a different context. Because someone was spreading lies about me saying, oh, I call Buck a man, and I refer to Buck as a biological man. And I was like, no, I've never done that. And they're like, well, but what pronouns do you use? And I'm like, I mean, are you fucking kidding me? Like, who cares? I try to avoid the pronouns because it's just fraught with problems. Naturally, for me, I do want to use sex-based pronouns, but for someone like Buck, I love Buck. Buck is my friend.
Oh my fucking God. Okay, so we're radical feminists, and P.S. I'm actually a lesbian separatist, so I'm like a next level, hardcore, ultra, whatever, extremist, radical feminist. We're bad because we are like policing people's use of pronouns. But he just said he doesn't use pronouns because he doesn't want to like step into that. He basically just said it's too political. He doesn't want to like make his position on that. Bro, you're making a documentary on gender criticals. You've made your position clear. Like, if you're gonna do it. Like, don't be fucking weak. Also, then he's like, oh, well, Buck's my friend. Okay, so do you have principles and values or not? Because if you do, an individual person shouldn't throw them all on their head. Like, what the fuck? Okay. I'm so glad we're doing this, guys. This is great.
I just don't care. I don't see how using he, him pronouns for Buck is going to, you know, harm children or somehow make men enter into women's spaces or somehow, I just don't understand. Like, what do you think their thinking is there? Like, why do you think they're so puritanical, some of these people, and they want to police your language? They want to no platform people. Like, do you think that in their minds that this is some ultimate good that they have to be?
What is this? Are they referencing a recent person who's been no platformed or who's been canceled within the GC? Like, are they referencing a specific thing? I've been off the internet for like 8 or 9 months. I've been off the internet since like June. So, are they referencing something specific? Because they keep saying this over and over again. Yeah.
Be so stringent and so, you know, dogmatic about this because otherwise.
Dogmatic. I would love for him to define dogmatic.
Because that's what they say. They say, you know, otherwise you don't care about women or you don't care about children or something.
Yeah, there's a huge leaps of logic that happens if you use certain pronouns, either one side or the other. And I do think that the pronoun issue is almost one of the most incendiary issues. I do think I am in favor of free speech, and I don't believe in policing other people's speech. And I don't care in what way you're policing me. And I do think these people, without a doubt, think that there is a radical good in protecting certain speech. And they do think they have to police people's speech. And they do think fundamentally, I know it was said to me by, you know, quite a key figure in the gender critical movement, oh, we have to allow people to cling on to pronouns and to police other people's pronouns because that's all they've got. They can't, you know, I don't buy that.
Okay, so I can't believe that Stella O'Malley, I can believe it. I mean, she's obviously trying to position herself in a certain way in this interview, but it's insane to me that Stella O'Malley has been around the gender critical community for what, 4 years now? I don't remember exactly. And she's basically saying, I don't understand why they care so much about pronouns. Like, it used to be one of like the first things you talk about. Good for you, Carol. We should all take a break from Twitter. One of the first things you talk about when you're trying to pique someone is like, why do you use pronouns? Why would anybody use pronouns? And then step 2, if you use the pronoun, what comes after that? Like, she literally said, like, I don't know, 5 minutes ago in the video, to the things we all agree on, keep men out of like women's prisons, women's sports, and like women's shelters, something. I don't remember what she's, something like that. The reason we care about pronouns, I'm not saying that you need to like agree with me and do what I'm saying. The reason, it's obvious, it's self-evident why pronouns are a big fucking deal. You call someone she, then you can't say, well, you shouldn't be allowed in the she space, right? And she's like, well, I don't know why. Why do they care so much about the pronouns? It's not free speech. Also, again, radical feminists do not have institutional power to govern anyone doing anything. So this is, again, like, it's really like convoluted to me. They keep referring to radical feminists as like far left feminists, and then using like dog whistles that conservatives use to refer to social justice warriors to refer to us, and yet they're the ones saying, they're making the argument basically that I should be able to say whatever I want with zero consequences. That is not an argument. That is an argument that conservatives like, it's just, they're positioning themselves as like on the kind of conservative side, but then saying kind of like the opposite. Like, free speech doesn't mean zero consequences. Free speech means the government's not going to prosecute you for saying that. You can say whatever. In Canada, we have repugnant speech as a protected characteristic. And we specifically have like religious speech as a protected characteristic. Like, we've had a bunch of stuff, especially since the Israel-Palestine stuff like kicked off recently, you know, where you have people like calling for the death of religious minorities in the streets in Canada, and it's protected speech. Like, I don't understand why she's acting like radical feminists are going around handing out tickets and fines or something. Like, it's so over the top. Calm the fuck down.
That at all. I don't buy policing people's speech. I think it's the road to hell. I think it's going to go a very bad direction if we start nodding along when other people's speech is policed. I come from more of a free speech perspective than I come from, let's say, a leftist perspective. And the leftist perspective might be very into censoring people and certainly policing people because it's about the collective. And so they're kind of very comfortable with, we all have to agree and we all go this way and we all go that way. But about pronouns, what people would argue is, there was an essay written a few years ago that pronouns are rohypnol. And the idea was, this is a very famous essay, and the idea is that when you use wrong sex pronouns, you are mindlessly propagating an idea that that person is the opposite sex. I don't hold that.
Right.
I can hold two thoughts at the one time,
Right.
which is the fact that I'm using she, her, but the person is a male, or vice versa. I can handle that. I genuinely haven't thought about this to the nth degree. I genuinely think some people find that very difficult. And there might be some brains that actually...
Is she saying that women who don't use wrong sex pronouns are too stupid to hold in their head fiction versus reality at the same time? That's her position, that she's too smart to care about misleading those who are uninformed. Jesus fucking Christ. I don't propagate it mindlessly. I propagate it knowingly. Yeah, she also just said, I haven't thought about this to the nth degree because I'm subtext, because I'm too important for that. I'm too smart to care about this. Bro, this is so fucking insane. Are you for real, man?
Actually, I truly believe it, because I can see when I'm talking, let's say, for example, with my husband, and if I use certain pronouns, you can see him stopping and go, wait, which is this?
Right.
So I too think that the people who get incredibly exercised about pronouns might be of a brain or a mindset or a way of thinking that falls in with the sex of the person once the pronoun is used, in a way that arguably me and you don't. So arguably,
is she trying to say that because she's a liberal and so far has not described herself as a feminist in any way, which seems consistent with, like, you know, her behavior and her thinking, that she doesn't recognize sex as that important? Meanwhile, we're too obsessed with the importance of sex when discussing anyone in any context. I think that's pretty rich coming from her, given like her entire fucking career.
arguably we're just different types of people with different ways of thinking, so that it just doesn't, I don't get any brain ache if I think of a trans woman and I use she, her, and I know he's a man. I can do that, or I know she's a man, or, you know, I can do that. I just think other people can't. And they think we're thinking the way they're thinking. And they think once you use she, her, you think he's a man.
Okay, but that might be true, what she just said. Like, if you're lending, by using preferred pronouns, you're lending credence to the fiction. That might be true when it comes to like extra community stuff, right? Like community, like as if it's a real community to begin with. But like, say I use a preferred pronoun around a random person on the street who doesn't know about the dialogue, right? They would think, oh, well, Benji views that person as the sex that they believe they are. When it comes to intra-community stuff, like I saw there's this article by Janice Raymond that everyone's losing their shit that she's using preferred pronouns. I wouldn't use preferred pronouns, but Janice Raymond is one of the first journalists in mainstream UK media to start publishing on gender critical stuff consistently. And she's publishing in a mainstream newspaper, so she has to follow a style guide. And her editors have to approve what she's writing. Otherwise, she won't get published in mainstream media. It's that fucking simple. Like Janice Turner. I'm so sorry. Thank you, Beans. Yes, Janice Turner is who I'm talking about. I've lost my train of thought now, but I think you understand my point. I think I made my point enough. Let's keep going.
Interesting. Yeah, that probably is part of it. I think too that I'm doing a little bit of mind reading here, but I do think just by the tenor and the way that people talk about this stuff, that sometimes it's not that. It's not that they can't.
I'm being very generous.
You are being very generous. Yeah.
She's being generous and calling us stupid. Guys, thank you, Stella O'Malley, for your generosity.
Again, puritanical just seems to be the right word for some of these people. They just seem to be so obsessed with that you have to use, and it's not just the pronouns. It's you can't even say the word transition, for instance, because there's no such thing as transition. But obviously, we're just using this as shorthand. Obviously, no one's transitioning from one sex to another. The only way that we're using that word, at least the way I use that word, is to cover an array of things, you know, taking puberty blockers, taking cross-sex hormones, getting surgery.
Okay, I just want to, at this point, take a moment to mention something that I just thought of. I am actually kind of on her side in a way, and yet I find everything she's saying to be so fucking dumb. So I do agree that no one should tell anybody what to say, and I don't think most people are online, most feminists anyway. And I do agree that there is a time and a place to, like, he's now mentioning the term transition, and I have come across obviously women online who are like, transition, even the word, it's like a misnomer. Agreed. However, depending on who you're talking to and what you're talking about, sometimes it's the only word that makes any sense in the context, and it's the only word you can use to communicate that specific concept. And I don't know anybody, or there definitely are some people who are puritanical about it, but it's like a very small number. Like, I've always very strongly believed that if you are talking to someone who is just changing the way that they think, or if you are talking to somebody who hasn't changed at all the way they think and you're trying to get your point across, use the language that they know. Use the language that will help them understand the idea you're trying to explain, the language that will keep them receptive to the new challenging information you're trying to portray. And I think that there is like such a small number of women who genuinely freak out every time. And also, my number one issue at this point is that they're acting like they don't understand why women would be upset. First of all, when a woman on Twitter is saying, I don't like that this whoever used preferred pronouns rather than sex-based pronouns, they're not trying to say like people should be fired and never published again or something. They're professing their opinion, which is like the fucking point of the internet. Okay, so if you don't want that, like, stay off the internet. I don't know what to tell you. But at the end of the day, it's like intellectual consistency. You can't say AGPs need to be protected because men with paraphilias are like some poor victims, which is often Stella O'Malley's point. And yet say, I don't know, like, it's not that important who's a man or a woman, or we don't need to recognize who's a man or a woman. Meanwhile, constantly professing that like every teenage boy is like some kind of victim of society or some shit. Like, you can't say it matters so much and yet let's not recognize who's impacted by it. Let's play word games and forget about the specificity of what actually matters, even though I just told you a second ago that's what matters. Like, you can't have it both ways. Just, it's a lack of consistency that's a problem.
Obviously, no one can change sex, but that brings up another topic, which is you're not really allowed to wonder about these things or to think out loud. And people will say, well, you are allowed, but just be ready to be corrected. It's like, well, fuck you. I just want to think through these things. And so this brings up the topic of the film that you were in, which I thought was lovely. It's one of my favorite films on the topic.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that film is called Trans Kids, It's Time to Talk. And so you were new to this subject, if I'm correct. And you went around just talking to all these people. And I watched it. I didn't know you. I was doing research to do my first interview with you. And there was literally nothing in there that you said that I thought, oh, wait a minute. Is she on the other side? But then so many people have just lambasted you. So you don't have to go into too much detail, I'm sure.
So they've just told us that Stella O'Malley is the voice of reason, and she knows how to be a true intellectual who sits outside the rhetoric and tells us the truth. Thanks for setting that up for us, dude. Without you, we would have no idea.
We've talked about it elsewhere, but what happened with that film, or what are you comfortable talking about?
Well, it's been devastating, really, the misinterpretation and the I will be corrected that it's not a misinterpretation, but the very bad faith analysis that has been made of that film. So the premise of the film was I was a psychotherapist. I'd had gender issues as a kid. Other people call it something else. I wanted to be a boy when I was a kid. And as a psychotherapist, I wanted to know, could any of the 4,000% rise in girls seeking medical transition, could any of them be like me? And it was a fairly mental health based question. And I came through it and I became completely comfortable in my own skin. And I certainly thought that it would be likely that some of these kids would be like me. And I found out that they were. And that was the premise of the film. The idea was to have a newbie like me who I'd never really been on Twitter. I had a Twitter account. I didn't even know how to do it. I had to do Twitter at the time. And I'd not been in the culture wars on any level. And I was not a feminist. And I was living in rural Ireland. And it was a good film. We interviewed an awful lot of people from all sorts of different perspectives. And it ended with a person who had detransitioned, who was very similar like me, and it was very sad. And
I don't know which detransitioner she's talking about because I watched that once, when it first came out, which was 1,000 years ago, in gender critical internet time. But there's no way that girl was just like her. What? Okay.
What happened afterwards was there was a huge contingent of people who lambasted me, who were also of the opinion that children shouldn't medically transition, but they believed that I had taken the wrong tone because I had interviewed Debbie Hayton. I didn't even know who Debbie Hayton was at the time. As far as I was concerned, this was a trans woman who also agreed that children shouldn't medically.
So Beansprout brings up a good point here. Thank you. I remember that. Okay, so she does this all the fucking time. I barely interacted with her in the last 2 years, and it's the same fucking MO. I have this righteous quest to save the children. And these people, they don't like that I talk to Debbie Hayton. But my righteous quest to save the children, guys, we can't get distracted because of my righteous quest. And if I supported this guy who seems to abuse his wife and fucking on camera ambushed this clearly religious woman who is stuck in what I think is an abusive marriage by asking her if she's a lesbian now that her husband is fucking transitioned, people are just splitting hairs and trying to attack me for no reason. Because remember, I have my righteous quest to save the children. This is... Can you imagine if an MRA like Matt Walsh was I'm on a quest to save the children? And in that quest, he interviewed a man who is abusing his wife. And everybody was like, I agree with that part. Maybe like the wife abuser, we don't like that part. And he was like, you guys are just trying to distract from the real issue. Bro, seriously, what the fuck? Anyway, that's what I have. The Debbie Hayton situation is like very clear cut to me. Yeah. Yes. Carol says it just so happens that desperate parents will pay a lot of money for her to save their kids. Yeah, it's really fucking obvious that she has built a business off of this. Yeah, anyway, let's keep watching.
Medically transition. What added to the story was we realized when we met the family that, oh my God, this family's life had been ripped apart, and we're very honest about it. And so we showed it on the film. We showed the utter devastation that will happen to children and to a wife when a father says, I'm going to medically transition. So we filmed all that. And what happened was the battery ran down. So there was only one camera being used on the day. So we were filming me, and then hours later, we were filming Stephanie, Debbie's wife. And hours later, we were filming Debbie. At one point, there was a camera on one face.
So she's acknowledging that it looks really fucking bad. Before she was saying everything was like totally normal and fine in this film. Now she's saying it looked really bad, but here's the excuse why it looked bad. Bro, shut the fuck up.
Oh, I see.
Do you understand? Yeah. And then we had to put it all together later on. Now, the way this was interpreted was the camera would cut to me and then go over to Stephanie, and people said, can you see the devastation on her face when Stella said that? It was 6 hours apart. Right. It was a farcical point.
No one cares about that.
And that's when I saw a really ugly.
So she started off by saying all the feminists were freaking out for no fucking reason and splitting hairs and lambasting her just because, and they're all mean bitches. Okay, so now she's saying, of course I empathize with Debbie's wife. I didn't have the information at the time to know how devastating this was for her, even though I went there to interview how much the transition had devastated this family or some shit. Bro, this is so convoluted. Like, okay.
Side of this, because I corrected people in good faith saying, oh, no. What was happening was, and we were trying to show the devastation of the family. That was the point. No.
That was the point, but I didn't know about it until after the fact. What?
I figured it out, Stella. I figured it out that this family were really hurt. Stephanie was really hurt by your questions. And I'm like, Stephanie was really hurt. Stephanie actually sent me the warmest of emails saying, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about this terrible time in a really gentle way. So they had it wrong, but they will not be correct.
Okay, also, I totally believe that this woman sent her an email thanking her. You know why I believe that? A, female socialization. And B, she's in an abusive relationship with this man who clearly appreciated the attention that he got. So fucking duh. That doesn't mean anything. I thought you were some kind of like family therapist specializing in bullying or something. She's being bullied by her husband. This is like fucking, why can't you see that? Okay.
On this.
Yeah, that was my next question, is how, I assume you let people know that, well, this is what actually happened, and then how did those people respond?
They ignored any sort of email or DM that I sent explaining it, and instead chose to always have it in the public realm and always dismiss and disregard. And anytime I tried to say, actually, you've got your facts wrong, they tell me.
Okay, but a big part she's leaving out, a big part of that was like, okay, I never heard about this whole the editing was the reason why thing until now. And I've been around like for fucking ever. I've been around since 2012 or some shit, okay? A big part of this is like she consistently associated with Debbie Hayton and consistently was like, Debbie Hayton is my source and my pal. So it doesn't really matter what you have to say about the actual content of that film and the editing and whatever your excuse is for why it turned out the way it is. If you genuinely thought Stephanie Hayton was struggling and traumatized and what was the word she used? Devastated by this situation with her husband, you wouldn't have had an ongoing positive public relationship with him. That's why people were upset about it. It's fucking simple.
I was being patronizing, or I was being dismissive, or I was being defensive, and I've no doubt that's what I'll be described as now. And I was like, I'm actually genuinely telling you something about the day that happened. And I saw a side that I realized that there is a huge contingent that once the word Debbie Hayton arrives, I've heard it called Debbie Hayton derangement syndrome, they absolutely go insane.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know the insides of Debbie Hayton's marriage. I wouldn't dare to comment or judge on anybody's marriage. I do know Stephanie, Debbie's wife, and I do know Stephanie seems to be a very strong and successful woman who I wouldn't dare patronize. I wouldn't dare condescend in that manner.
Right. Yeah, there seems to be.
So her position is that this woman is too strong to be abused? Shut the fuck up.
A lot of that from this particular side. They I don't know if patronize is the right word, but they, for instance, which we can get into, I don't want to get into it too much yet, but there was obviously the now sort of infamous photo with Phil Illey, who's an AGP, with a Laura, detransitioner. And what I read on Twitter, Kelly J. Keane shared this and was, deriding the whole conference that just happened. But what I found fascinating is they were trying to speak for Laura, saying, oh, this poor detransitioner, she's so vulnerable. They use words like that. So they're just, imputing, emotions and a state of mind.
Sisters, who the fuck is this Phil guy? Do I know who he is and they're using a different name, or is he like new? Because I don't know who the fuck this Phil is. I can guess which Laura this is. There's like 3 Laura detransitioners. Just guessing. I think I know which one it is. But just who this Phil guy?
Mind to her that she didn't have. I mean, she tried to even correct some of these people by saying, Phil was friendly with me. There was no problem. Why are you speaking for me? So that, what interested me in getting into this whole space in the first place was that I grew up super religious, and I eventually very slowly left that behind. And then, lived in Portland for a long time. Thankfully, I just moved out of Portland, which I'm very happy about. But just that religious kind of dogmatism and the puritanical nature of this in-group, out-group thinking. And I thought, wow, this is clearly happening with the trans topic. I want to cover this topic because there's so much black and white thinking. You can say the wrong word at any moment. And then I was
black and white thinking. So yet again, it's the feminists who have a rigorous analysis that stick to their values, who are the ones who are unthinkingly dogmatic, and not her who said, I haven't really thought about this, but I'm too smart to get involved. We're the ones doing black and white thinking. Again, please define black and white thinking. Like, you haven't defined any of the words you've been using because you're not using them right.
Just really depressed. I've been just depressed for the last 3 months, just realizing that, this same thing, it exists everywhere. And it exists in this, sort of, I don't know if you'd call it an anti-trans movement, but certainly those who are critical of the trans ideology or the gender ideology, the same kind of thing is existing in there too. And that's just, it's just depressing.
It's incredibly depressing and disappointing. I want to say that when we did the film, it was in 2018, we got the first detransitioner on mainstream TV ever, know?
Yeah.
And that was groundbreaking.
We got the first detransitioner on mainstream TV ever. I can't remember specifics of who went on TV when, but wasn't there... I remember the first time there was like mainstream BBC coverage of detransitioners. I think she knew them, but I don't think she was involved in getting them on the BBC. Like that statement seems completely factually incorrect to me.
And we spent an entire year fighting with Channel 4 to get every scene in. Every scene was fought about. Every word was fought about.
Wow.
Lines were filmed and they were taken out and they were put back in. There was just right up until the day before the film went out. So the film went out, as far as I remember, on a Wednesday. And I was on a train up to Dublin on a Tuesday to record extra sentences to get put in because of the fraught nature of this. And this was very much on the idea of, it felt very dangerous to say that children shouldn't medical transition at the time. At the time, it felt very dangerous to criticize on any level anything to do with the trans narrative. And so I did go up to the studio in Dublin, and they asked me to say certain sentences, which they were voicing over,
Right.
you know. They wanted me to give the NHS version of gender dysphoria, and I wanted.
Okay, so yet again, it's more of this thing about like, I have done so much work for you guys. You have to appreciate me and stop criticizing me. Calm the fuck down, lady. Like, this is so self-centered. Like, you got here after so many women have done so much stuff for like years in many countries, in the public sector, in the private sector, in social settings, in private, like so many women have got us to this point. You are not the savior of trans kids. Like, fucking shut up.
To stick with the DSM definition of dysphoria, and they said no, the NHS. Now the NHS one has since, I've been proved right, it's since changed towards the DSM definition. But I left that studio in tears and thinking the film wasn't going out. And that was the day before the film went out. So that's how kind of really, really tense it was.
Yeah.
And our entire premise was children shouldn't medically transition. This is crazy experimental stuff and this shouldn't be happening. That was the premise of the film. They're like, these are lost kids, give them a break.
Right.
You know, put some protections around them. And I'll never forget the utter disappointment and depression I felt when all these people who professed to be on the same side as me, who did not want children to be medically transitioned, turned on me in the most vicious way. And they did not relent. They kept on. It was very much led by that entire crowd that have jumped in on the Phil Lilly, which would be very much, you know, the whole Grace O'Malley, but certainly Kelly J. Keane fell in with it. And she, you know, Kelly J. kept on saying to me,
I just think it's funny that she's giving air to Grace O'Malley, like she's on the same level as Kelly J. Keane. That's pretty funny.
You have to call, you know, Debbie Hayton a man, it's a he, a Mr. And I was, you know, privately messaging saying, you know, I have an accreditation body. I'm a psychotherapist. I'll be thrown off Twitter, but I'll also get into significant trouble with my accreditation. It's some years later now, and what we're allowed to say now is much.
Wait, so the reason that she was in professional upheaval was because mean ladies on Twitter? That is the dumbest shit I ever heard. If you are in a profession that is sensitive to, like, you know, if it's involving children or professional accreditation, that you can be reported and have, like, you know, the right to work with children, or they're like your professional credentials overturned or suspended or something, and you do something in public that could lead to that, it's your fucking fault that you did that in public without considering the consequences. It's not the fault of people who have eyeballs watching you do that. Like, she literally was like, I did a controversial thing. People who are supposed to be on my side didn't support me. That's not the reason that you thought your license might be suspended. Also, this is the first I've ever heard of this, my license might have been suspended thing. Also, dude, like, she started off by being like, I didn't know how to use the Twitters. I didn't know how to do the tweets. The internet was a strange place because I'm from rural Ireland. Because, you know, obviously in rural Ireland, they don't have the internet. Are you seriously telling me by the point that she had, like, done this film and published her book or started Gen Spect or whatever, that she didn't know who Posey Parker was, and that Posey Parker was, like, hardcore, this is my position no matter what, no matter who, this is my position? Are you seriously telling me you didn't understand that? Like, she literally is like, I jumped in a pool, I didn't know how to swim, the water attacked me. Bro, that's not how that works. This is the internet. Grow the fuck up.
Freer than what we were allowed to say in 2018 on this issue. But certainly I was very constrained, and it was like, you're publicly denouncing me, but you won't speak with me privately so that I can explain that there's certain positions I'm in as a psychotherapist. I want to stay working as a psychotherapist. I had attacks on my license anyway from trans activists.
Right.
And so why are you scuttling me? Why are you actually trying to ruin my career actively?
Yeah.
On both sides. It was a really, really, really distressing, and talk about a baptism of fire. It was a horrible, and I kept on thinking, why are they fixating?
Okay, so she's making a drama about nothing. Beansprout says there isn't any statutory registration or licensing for psychotherapists in the UK. Okay, so she's making a drama about nothing. Great, thanks.
On Debbie Hayton, who frankly wasn't an important part of the film.
Yeah.
The important part of the film is children are medically transitioning. They're going to be
Right.
infertile and they're going to be sexually impaired for the rest of their life. Debbie Hayton is a different issue. It's autogynephilia, it's a different issue. And by the way, I didn't even know what autogynephilia was when I first interviewed Debbie, because I think Debbie was one of the first interviews. Certainly I didn't know, because I remember when I found out what autogynephilia was, and I went, oh, because I thought back to Debbie and I thought, I now see.
Oh, so you learned after the fact.
I learned after. I didn't know what autogynephilia was.
So she didn't do anything wrong, but in retrospect, now she knows the truth that she didn't used to know, so you can't hold her accountable for the thing that she didn't do wrong. Thanks.
Yeah.
So I would have brought it up. I'm the type who brings things up. I say things straight.
Yeah.
So had I known what autogynephilia was, of course I would have brought it up.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's something I've been noticing. There's so many threads to pick up on, but one thing I wanted to mention is that, I did a live thing with Peter in LA a few weeks ago, and we had all of these people, all these live questions, and they lasted a minute, and so the trans topic would come up, and someone would the whole conversation is fraught, as you know, with technicalities, and it's so difficult to sort of navigate anyways. And then when you're doing it live, it's very fast. And I remember thinking, wow, I don't even know if I agree with myself, having just said what I said.
Know.
But people are so unforgiving. They don't care that it's live. They don't care that you have a camera on you, that you're nervous, that you're trying to work this out in real time. They just don't seem to care. They just pounce on the one thing, the scene with Debbie Hayton or what.
Okay, if the problem is people on the internet are unforgiving and look through your shit that you did live to attack you, you know who else is in that same position? Someone that I don't really like that much, Posey Parker. Whenever somebody has a complaint about Posey Parker, there's thousands of hours of her doing live streams that they clip together to say look all these bad things she's done. Stella O'Malley is acting like she is some unique victim of this feminist conspiracy because she's so important and is saving the children and all that. Single-handedly teaching the UK about the situation with trans things. When actually she's just a woman on the internet who's experiencing what it's like to be a woman on the internet, like all the other fucking women on the internet.
Whatever, yeah.
Gotcha.
And so that's...
it's incredibly disappointing.
Yeah.
And can I just jump on something that you raised earlier? One is the bad faith attitude, which is a fundamental premise that I reject. And I just think we have to be free to make mistakes. Yeah. We have to be free to kind of, the spirit of what I'm saying and the spirit of my meaning matters more than the actual words I use. Hence, I reject the kind of premise of anybody policing my pronouns. But on top of that is something that you did raise that I do think is very true, which is there's an incredibly...
Okay, but the idea that... Why does my camera keep unfocusing? Freaking focus. Okay. The idea that radical feminists are incapable, gender critical feminists, and radical feminists, which she says are three different groups, are now all one group, and they're all incapable of forgiving or accepting that people change, completely untrue. Women's Place UK used to associate with a bunch of AGPs, and they stopped doing that because feminists were like, you're supporting abusers and necessarily alienating survivors of domestic violence and the wives of the abusers. And Women's Place UK was like, we hear you. We're not going to do that anymore. And then they changed, and everybody was like, well, not everybody, but a lot of women were like, okay, we see that you listen to our concerns and addressed it and changed, and that's it. Also, me, my early videos that are still up, I have a bunch of videos where I was like, maybe some people are trans, and maybe transition is right for them. And now I'm 100% anti-transition in every single circumstance, and nobody's being like, Benji is fucking two-faced. She's acting like it's so extreme when it's and also, she has done a lot of work to elevate herself to being so high profile and such an authority. Even this video started by calling her, what is it, the president or director of Gen Spect. I'm high profile and have authority, but if you take me seriously based on my actions, that's mean. Dude, what the fuck? Yeah, Alyssa says, I question Stella's dysphoria backstory, TBH. Yeah, for sure. Someone says in here. Yeah, Carol says we aren't supposed to listen to her words. Yeah, fucking exactly. Oh my gosh, actually, some of you on here I know me from like my old Tumblr days. My very first gender critical Tumblr was called Fuck Your Gender ID. And at that time I was a gender critical trans man. And I literally was like a gender critical trans man, completely intellectually inconsistent. And you are still following me here when I'm a lesbian separatist who is like 100% anti-transition. Like, the concept that radical feminists can't accept that people change and evolve and make mistakes or don't think things through and reassess, like, that's just completely inaccurate. Okay.
Inappropriate tone to a lot of this, which is the presumption that, for example, Stephanie, Debbie's wife, is an abused wife without any evidence other than the evidence that my film produced. And my film was very definitely very heavily edited. That's number one. And number two, that put upon Laura in the Phil Illy scenario, that there was this idea that poor Laura, I spoke to Laura in depth last week about it all. And Laura is furious
Understandably.
at how people spoke about her.
Yeah.
Laura is a really strong.
I like Laura.
She's just so cool. She's so strong.
Yeah.
She wanted the photo. She was very proud of the photo. And she is absolutely, this idea, let women speak. Well, let Laura speak.
Right.
Okay, so what she's just done with the let women speak, she has implied that radical feminist, this is her own categorization from the beginning of the video, radical feminists, gender criticals who are not feminists, and gender criticals who are feminists are all in the Posey Parker camp. Not the case. And again, this idea of, like, I don't know about this Laura situation. I looked it up. I found the video, the pictures of this Phil Illy dude and Laura, whatever. I saw the picture. Okay. I don't know anything else about the situation or this Gen Spect conference in Colorado or whatever the fuck it is. I'm learning about it as you say in the live chat. So I'm not saying that there was like some kind of abuse or like assault or so. I don't know. I don't know anything about it. But I'm suspicious of this because she said it before when she was referring to David/Debbie Hayton and Stephanie Hayton. She just kept saying, well, you know, Stephanie is so strong, such an independent woman, like as if because she's strong and tough, she cannot be abused, or if she is abused, she can handle it or some shit. And now she's just used the exact same language to describe Laura. So again, is your position that if something bad happened, this woman has the power to withstand it or had the agency to choose for herself to get in this bad situation, which it seems that the organizers of Gen Spect architected? Like, it's just like passing off blame and trying to say, like, if anything bad happened, it's the fault of those women, or if anything bad happened, it's not as bad as you think it is. Some weird shit. Like, it's very, this reminds me of like 1950s, like, well, women's being abused, but you know, women are tough or some shit. Like, so like they should stay with their husband. You know what I mean? Like, it's giving 1950s sexism. Okay.
Let Laura speak. Let Laura say what was going on.
Totally.
Rather than this idea that they know better.
Right. Let's back up and explain for those who don't know.
Yeah.
So just to give a little context, so Helen Joyce invited me to your first conference in Killarney, which I thought was fantastic, and I was able to interview a lot of people there. It was great. And then you had a follow-up conference in Denver back in November of 2023, which you hired me to live stream and showed my film.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so he is her friend. Remember at the very beginning, I was like, is this a friend of hers that was like, I'm going to use my platform so you can like give your 2 cents on this like current Twitter drama? I said that at like the beginning, and like, okay, so he's known her for a long time and he's been doing work with her. He's probably making money off of like this industry that she's developed. So, yep.
Yeah, it was great. And I thought the conference was amazing. I thought it was wonderful. I thought it was even better than the Killarney conference. I mean, you had so many people, you know, Michael Schellenberger and Heather Hying and all these amazing people give great talks, James Lindsay, Colin Wright. And to me, it seemed like the tenor of the conversation on Twitter or
intellectuals,
anywhere else should have been really positive. Like, wow, we're making, you know, strides to correct these problems. You know, we're making a lot of progress. But I didn't see any of that. All I saw was this now infamous photo that I don't know who started sharing it, but when I first saw it, it was Kelly J. Keene. She shared this photo of Phil Illy and Laura, and then maybe you can describe kind of what happened there.
Okay, so I want to back up myself a bit. The idea of Gen Spect is to promote a healthy approach to sex and gender. We believe that WPATH are the root, stem, and branch of.
Describe sex. Define sex. define gender, define healthy. Because that's a pretty subjective statement right there.
The issue around gender ideology. They promote transgender healthcare in a very reckless way, frankly, in a very alarmingly dangerous way. And so because of the hashtag no debate, there has been a silencing of our side, of people who wish to question the speed of people's transition, medical transition, and also the concept of childhood medical transition. And because we have been silenced in many ways by trans activists in really scurrilous ways, we decided that we would hold a counter conference wherever they held a conference. So they held a conference in Killarney, Ireland. We held a conference at the very same time. They held a conference in Denver, Colorado. We held a conference in Denver, Colorado. And we held it successfully. We brought in a huge amount of people. We were just as busy as they were, so as large as their conference as ours was as big, showing that there's an entirely different perspective. We called the conference series The Bigger Picture, and we're showing that there's another perspective, which is saying that medical transition for childhood is not a good idea because there's too many risks and there's too many issues around it. We platform detransitioners and we talk about the issue. And we also talk about the wider issue around sociological issues, legal issues, cultural issues and biological issues. So there's so many other issues.
Parents,
there's so many different, and we platform as many of them as we can. It's a very stuffed kind of schedule because we're going go, 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 different people's ideas.
Yeah.
And it happened successfully. We were very, very nervous because it's a hidden gun state where you're allowed to carry a gun in
concealed carry. Yeah.
Yeah. There's all sorts of. So I was told by a million people not to hold this conference, that I didn't understand American culture, that there was going to be guns, there was going to be Antifa, there was going to be Proud Boys, there was going to be everybody. And
if it was Portland, there would have been.
For
sure.
Well, everybody told me, Stella.
Oops. I've been super out of the loop. Obviously, as I've said, I've been like off the internet for like a long time. And even when I was still on the internet, I was trying to stay out of this like gender critical therapist industry shit because they're a bunch of like snake oil salesmen. And so she's just said that they're trying to basically be like, every time WPATH holds a conference, they hold a counter conference, which as a tactic, I think is actually quite interesting and probably a good idea. But given what they're trying to do, it makes no sense. Bean Sprout says, from what I can gather, they are trying to be the alternative to WPATH, which I find concerning, because why would you need to be a WPATH or alternative if the aim is to prevent transition entirely? Fucking correct. What is WPATH? WPATH is a group of people, like surgeons and endocrinologists and shit, who make money off of transition, who write guidelines for themselves and their colleagues who also make money off of this to approve of the things that they're already doing. That's what WPATH is. They are basically like lobbyists, but instead of lobbying to the government, they're lobbying to society at large to say, look, we're doing great things. You should support us in doing these great things that we're already doing because we're already making money off of them. So keep supporting us. We can keep making money off of them. That's what WPATH does. Gen Spect, in a lot of ways, is the exact same thing, but in the opposite direction. Like, your kid has gender troubles, come to us, we'll make money off of it, and then we'll give you like a seal of approval that you did a good job and we did a good job and we all did a good job together. Hooray for good jobs. Like, yeah, like that gender giraffe thing. Like, they're literally trying to position themselves as like the opposite to the other thing. But the gender giraffe is a fucking perfect example of why Gen Spect makes no fucking sense. Because, like, okay, in the gender giraffe thing, there was gender identity, sex, and then like a third category or stereotype, or they added like, so they like agreed with all the sexist stereotypes that lead to the concept of gender identity being validated by society, and then they added a little bit on top. What? I thought that like Blanchard and Zucker and all of them were saying that children don't have the intellectual capacity to understand gender identity. So the solution is to teach them gender identity plus more stuff, so then they'll understand the truth about it? No. Or like somebody was saying in the live chat earlier, so pediatric transition is not okay, but other transition is okay. Why? Like, just inconsistent. You can't fence sit on all this shit and act like it's just insane. Yeah.
You don't know what you're doing. You're Irish, you're naive. This is going to be closed down. It's going to be violent. You're going to ruin this movement.
Wow.
And it was very, very, very fraught as a result.
Yeah.
And so we had a very elaborate 4-stage security presence to get into the conference. I'm laughing now because it was all safe in the end. I certainly wasn't laughing in October before the conference. I was as tense as I've ever been during the conference, you know. And it ended up being a very successful conference. It ended up being really good. People were free to talk. There was an awful lot of disagreement in the room, but everybody was civilized. And it was really well done, if you follow me. There was very much acceptance that we don't agree, that feminists arguably don't agree with the parents, that the detransitioners arguably don't agree with the feminists, etc.
By the way, one of my favorite moments, I forget, it was a trans woman, I forget.
That was sneaky. Do you guys see that? The detransitioners arguably don't agree with the feminists. It's very complicated. I could talk about it for like an hour. But there's all of these predatory organizations that are like scooping up detransitioners. Like the day after a detransitioner makes a Twitter account being like, this is my detrans story, suddenly Gen Spect or like these, you know, these tiny organizations that have like a spokesperson, you don't know anything else about who they are, who are like detrans support groups or something. Like the day after the detransition, somebody approaches them and says, do you want to be a spokesperson for us? Do you want to be on our advisory board? Do you want to do this, that, and the other thing? Come to do our shit with us. They've never had any time to like decompress. They've never gotten therapy. You'll notice none of them ever said like, oh, Sasha or Stella have supported me in my mental health XYZ. They never say anything like that. They're not actually getting support. They're getting used at a time when detransitioners are most vulnerable to be used. And a bunch of them now are being like kind of radicalized as they detransition, because it used to be that the only spheres of the internet that supported like a deconstruction of transition was radical feminist parts of the internet. So all of us went through, like us, like me back then, went through like a kind of feminist consciousness raising to understand our transition and detransition and like our place in society and blah, blah, blah. Now you have people who are detransitioning, and like who's the first people they talk to? Parents of trans kids, who a lot of them are like pretty unhinged, understandably or not, depending, you know. These strange therapists who are like not someone like Stella or Sasha, who is like high profile because they're too important for that. But there's all these strange therapists online now who are like, oh, like I dabble in detrans things. Like, let me talk to you, because they're using like these random detransitioners online as an experiment to like learn about it for themselves. You have like all of these like oh my gosh, what is a Getter on Getter? You have all of these like religious fundamentalist types who are like, oh, you're a detransitioner, like I'm here for you. These are my favorite scriptures in the Bible about that. Have you heard that there's like this religious conversion therapy that's actually like supporting detransitioners? You should go look at those people. Like there's all these different people now who like the moment a detransitioner makes one post online, they like descend on them being like, I'll support you. And they each have their own agenda and they each have their own ideology about why they're doing it. And so now you have like this huge diversity of like, you have like religious fundamentalist detransitioners who are like writing books and shit. So the fact she's like, oh, the detransitioners who don't always agree with the feminists, she's very sneakily trying to like position it as like feminists are against detransitioners, when like one, historically that is not the case, and two, like the reason it's not like that anymore is because of all of these fucking fence sitters who have like invited all of these creeps in to be like, we're all on the same side. That's okay, whatever.
Corinna Cohen.
Yeah, Corinna, at one point, you know, was talking about political action and how to organize, and then cued the whole audience and said, you know, how many of you consider yourself on the left? Half the people raised their hand. How many consider yourselves on the right? Half the people raised their hand. And then said something to the effect of, you know, how many of you want to stop child transition? Everyone raised their hand.
Yeah.
I thought that was just like, clearly, this is why we're here. This and you know, trying to stop detransition and all these problems. I thought that was a really encapsulated what that conference was about for me. Like, you can disagree, you can be on the left or the right or the middle, whatever, but we're all here to essentially do the same thing, which I thought that was great.
And we were meeting on a higher purpose that really mattered, which is let's look after children here.
Yeah.
Because that's what society should do. And everything else is up for debate.
Right.
But that is something that we should come together and get that one over the line. and then discuss everything else. In the midst of all that, there was a Gen Spect team who were putting out photos, who were doing tweets all the time. So the person who was doing the tweets, she was amazing. And she was whacking out tweets all the time about the conference, because that's what you're trying to do. We're trying to raise awareness. And she did it really, really well. In the midst of it all, loads of photos were taken. But one of the photos that was taken,
sorry. So she's like, nothing bad happened. Everyone had agency. Everyone decided what they wanted to be photographed and what they wanted to be posted, and everything was fine because we're strong, independent women and all this shit. At the same time, chaos ensued. We had no idea what was going on. How can we be held accountable for like the chaotic things that happen at a conference that's chaotic? Either it doesn't need to be defended or it needs to be defended. Don't say it doesn't need to be defended and then go ahead and defend it. Like, it looks, you have like no credibility. It looks so bad.
taken was an autogynephile called Phil Illy, who identifies as a man. Therefore, he should please an awful lot of people on the gender critical side of the debate. He uses male toilets.
He should please an awful lot of people on the gender critical side of the debate. Is she trying to say that because he's a man, he has to fulfill a set of demands? Because what I think is that that's really stupid, and that if he's a man, he automatically is going to be disliked for saying what he says, that like he's an auto heterosexual or whatever, and all this shit. Like, it's like uncontestable. He's going to be disliked. End of story. Why are you acting like he's supposed to play some kind of a game and it's expected of him? We just don't like him because he's a man and he's an autogynephile and he's like an unrepentant public fetishist. Like, end of story.
So he doesn't impinge upon any of kind of the Gen Spect kind of values around that, and he behaved himself very well. He didn't behave in all inappropriate way.
Guys, Stella, who's obviously an amazing judge of character, has told us that Phil Illy behaved himself. Case closed. What else do we need?
And there was a picture taken with Phil Illy in a dress with Laura Becker, who is also eccentrically dressed, by the way, but is a woman, born woman, and wears crazy colors and, you know, likes the kind of...
Dude, this is so fucking insane. Okay, first of all, I don't give a fuck that he wore a dress. Wear whatever the fuck you want. It's part of his fetish, and he's telling us it's part of his fetish, and so we know that he's actively walking around engaging in his fetish. The actual clothing that a man wearing a dress is not my problem. Hey, a man wearing a dress is not my problem. My problem is being an unrepentant fetishist in public, okay? Now she's trying to say he was eccentrically dressed, just like her. Bro, shut the fuck up. Because you're trying to say that, like, because this girl likes brightly patterned clothes, it's the same thing as a man engaging unrepentantly in his public fetish at all times. A girl, also Laura wears very baggy, like body covering clothes. She doesn't like to show off her body, right? I don't know her, I've never spoken to her, but this is what I've seen her a lot of her pictures, right? And this man is doing the exact fucking opposite. Trying to equate the two because they're wearing bright colors is like completely fucking, like, I don't know what logical fallacy it is, but it's, you know, fucking misleading.
The eccentric side of life. You know, she calls herself funk god artist. She's amazing, really powerful presence. And it took a few days, and I don't know what happened in those few days, but why there was, you know, definitely a time lag. It wasn't instant. It wasn't a fact that we posted that picture and there was madness went out. It didn't happen like that.
Right.
The picture was posted. There wasn't much commented on it, but there wasn't much, you know, it was just one of many. Life continued, you know what I mean? The conference was a very big success, which I would say really annoys lots of people, because lots of people are of the opinion that we can't speak, that we have to be anonymous, that we're not allowed to say it to our...
Yeah, like, I haven't listened to entire episodes of her podcast, but I've listened to like clips, or somebody has like texted me and been like, you should see what she says at this timestamp of the you know, like I've listened to parts of them. She's constantly talking about how AGP is a sexual orientation and like how it's super, super sexual. Like, you know, it's not just like an identity label or something. It's like a sexual activity, right? I agree that it's like willfully naive. You can't have it both ways. I'm a specialist in like this pseudo sexology that I made up, or that I'm like evolving in my own way or whatever. And at the same time, it's not that sexual, so why are you guys making a big deal about it? I don't know if that's what you were talking about, J.L. Sitterblom, but that's what I got out of your comment.
Jobs, that we are gender critical,
Sure.
that we're not allowed to meet in conferences and discuss this. And this conference was rejecting all of that.
Yeah.
And actually we can, and we're jobs, that we are gender critical. But to be, say, really annoys lots of people, because lots of people are of the opinion that we can't speak, that we have to be anonymous, that we're not allowed to say it to our jobs, that we are gender critical,
Sure.
that we're not allowed to meet in conferences and discuss this. And
these are positions that TRAs hold. This is not positions that radical feminists hold. I know a lot of radical feminists who think the Gen Spect stuff is super fucking fishy. None of them think that you guys should like lose your jobs and be deplatformed or whatever the fuck she's implying right now. This is TRAs that like she's again equating two different things.
This conference was rejecting all of that.
Yeah.
And actually we can. I have like so many psychotherapists tell me, oh, I can't speak up, Stella, because I'm a psychotherapist. I'm like, I'm a psychotherapist. I speak up.
Right.
And for as long as you're not speaking up, I'm your cannon fodder. You know, I'm your kind of bulletproof vest. And so I'm sorry I'm ranting here. But
No, you're all good.
I'll get to the point. Yeah, so after a few days, so it was about Wednesday, the picture was posted on a Saturday, and it was about Wednesday that it kicked off. And certainly, Kelly J. Keane decided to run, videos that were 4 hours, Twitter Spaces and stuff, about this. And,
which, by the way, I have to just interject. I mean, is that really a good use of her time? I mean, or anyone's time, frankly? I mean, this just brings up, sorry to cut you off, but it just brings up such an important point, is that, and
I don't like Kelly J. Keane generally. I don't give a fuck what this man does or doesn't consider a good use of her time. He's a man. She's a woman. She can do whatever the fuck she wants. I don't need his approval for it. She doesn't need his approval for it. Shut the fuck up.
I want you to finish your story, but how much good is that doing? How many young girls is that going to save from double mastectomies, or how many little boys who are gay? We're going to stop them from getting puberty blockers because online people are complaining about some photograph. I mean, does this really advance the cause?
Some people would say that it does, because Kelly J's premise is she holds the line. Now, holding the line for other people.
Okay, but again, this is something else that I thought about, like when I saw the little clips of this, which I was like, we should talk about this on the channel. Your goals are not someone else's goals. So like when religious fundamentalists get involved in this, their number one primary concern isn't really pediatric transition. It's maintaining like the sanctity of the nuclear family, having control over their children, and that leading to the continuation of the nuclear heterosexual family. At least to me, that's what it looks like, okay? When Kelly J. Keane talks about this stuff, honestly, at this point, I think that her priority is to get attention and make money. But ostensibly, her priority is for women to talk about what's going on and how it's impacting them. That seems to be her priority. Stella O'Malley is being like, oh, Posey Parker, prioritizing women instead of the children. How dare she? Like, bro, different people. She started this video by being like, there are different groups. She didn't define who are the groups. What are the differences between the groups? What are the goals and priorities of the groups? Or what are the strategies those groups have to get those things done? Kelly J. Keane is the leader of like the gender criticals who are not feminists, at least from where I'm sitting. Like I said, I've been offline. Maybe that's not the case anymore, but she seems to be the leader of that group. Gender criticals who define themselves as not being feminists, but being for women. Their priorities are not the same as her priorities, and acting like they're just ineffective at getting their goals done because they're not doing it the way she's doing it is just like completely misleading.
Is arguably she is policing what we should do, right, and how we should do it and how we should speak about it. So that is what holding the line is. A lot of people seem to agree with this. That's what we should be doing. We should be holding the line. I think it's more important that we're civilized at all points. And even if you massively disagree with me, you should be civilized. And I think.
Okay. First of all, who is defining civilized and in which context? Right. Because her definition of civilized, at least from my contact with her, seems to be agree with me, and if you don't agree with me, you're not being civilized. You're destroying the work that I'm trying to do if you don't agree with me. That's pretty fucking high bar to fulfill. Also, just I know that she's not a feminist, and clearly she's demonstrated over the years that she doesn't know fucking anything about feminism. And you know, she's not obligated to know about feminism. But to me, this is like so telling. Like when women started wearing pants, they were seen as basically like whores running down the street. Like that's what's uncivilized. When women wanted to have no fault divorce, it was seen as like, you know, everything. When women started going to she's a psychotherapist. When women started going to university, that was seen as uncivilized. Like I just think it's really hilarious that she's chosen to say this thing in those words, given the history of what I as a feminist associate with that concept and those words. Women are not being civilized enough. If they were more civilized, they would get more attention in the right way. Open a history book. I don't know.
There's a way to complain. It was extraordinary that there was this insane storm on Twitter, but we didn't receive any emails. Not even one.
So no one reached out
Nobody
saying,
emailed
what
us.
is this?
Nobody said, I have an issue. What they did was they said everything down on videos and on Twitter and on videos and on Twitter.
Wait, I'm not up to date. I thought she tried to do this and didn't go anywhere. Am I wrong? Someone let me know in the live chat. Also, Isolt. Also, I'm so touched that you're here, Isolt. I've followed you on Twitter for so many years. Isolt made a thread about this video, and it had a clip of her talking about lesbians and how they get like sexually aroused by wearing men's clothes. And I have so many fucking thoughts. I don't know where that is in this video. We're like almost halfway through, so I'm sure we'll get there eventually. But we're definitely going to talk about that. But obviously, of course, that is a civilized thing to do. Yeah. Oh, she announced it yesterday. Okay, well. Good for her. Let's see what happens. Okay, actually, P.S. I need to change my shirt. I'm like sweating to death. 1 second.
It went everywhere on Twitter, but it didn't go anywhere beyond. That was very strange because it felt like, why, if you really were in good faith and you were genuinely worried about holding the line, why wouldn't you write a thoughtful email to an organization that is an allied organization that, you know, we share a lot, but we also disagree in a lot. And arguably, once the kids are safe, let's disagree, let's go there.
Yeah.
But until then, can we just be civilized in our disagreement? And I'm not saying don't hold the line all you want, but maybe there is a protocol to how to disagree with somebody. And for starters, you would go to them in a civilized manner.
It seems to me that, I mean, I don't even want to police how those people complain, but in their own self-interest, it seems.
Being spurred is like, because you don't respond to those emails, Stella. Yeah. Also, like, okay, so this thing with Laura that I had no idea about happened recently, apparently. Okay. I remember like when Gen Spect started doing all these things where they were talking about how teenage boys are AGPs and how they need like all this compassion, and they started platforming. Do you guys remember American Dog? What was his actual name? That was his Twitter name. He started talking about how he basically had a girlfriend who like broke up with him and then announced that she was a lesbian, and he had like all this resentment towards feminists and lesbians, and that's why he transitioned. And like Gen Spect was platforming this guy and interviewing him and like taking him as like a kind of role model for detransitioners and shit. And a ton of feminists and lesbians who had been donating to Gen Spect and who had been promoting Gen Spect stopped donating to them, stopped promoting them, and started emailing them and being like, hey, I've always supported you guys. I think you guys have a good mission, blah, blah, blah. And they were basically all told to fuck off, or they didn't get a response. So I don't know it for a fact, but I suspect at this point, anyone who has a problem with you has tried to contact you or knows someone who's tried to contact you and learned that it's fruitless. So they've stopped trying. Yeah, I did actually a live stream about a bunch of his tweets where I basically was like ranting about like the stupid fucking male detransitioners and how they're so fucking misogynistic and disgusting. Yeah.
Seems to me that they would want to reach out to Gen Spect, if anything, to get something to change. Like if their goal was to actually change your behavior, what's the best way to do that? Complain on Twitter or talk to you and say, hey, you know, this is the issue.
Again, you've misunderstood how the internet works. Not every single person who's complaining on Twitter is trying to like directly impact your actions or like change the world. They're just complaining on the internet because it's the fucking internet.
I have you thought about this, and have a reasonable dialogue. You'd think that that would be in their own interest for their own goals, but they don't do that. So
Can I point something out? So many people have talked about safeguarding, and I'm like, people who are talking about safeguarding don't seem to understand what safeguarding is. And these are organizations that promote themselves as safeguarding organizations.
Carol, can you please tell us some more about this? If you want, you don't have to. I just want to bring up this whole safeguarding thing. Okay. There are, what are those two organizations? Safe School Alliance and Gender Trend or whatever. Or did they get subsumed by Gen Spect? I can't remember. There is like 2 or 3 organizations in the UK that deal with gender critical things that are totally on top of safeguarding. It's like, you can tell it's a priority when they're designing their material and giving advice. Safe Schools Alliance and Transgender Trend. Okay, correct. Thank you. I mean, I was great. Yes, thank you, Bean Spread. And there's also a handful of individual women on Twitter who seem to be like safeguarding trainers or officers or like something that they will publish long threads explaining safeguarding protocol and why it is the way it is and how trans policy counteracts a lot of that and how like the real world implications of how that works. And they're fucking great. Stella O'Malley has said a lot of things online over the years that demonstrate, 1, she doesn't know what safeguarding is, and 2, even if she does, people should just do what she says because she says it regardless of safeguarding, even if she does know what, like, you know, just, I think it's really rich of her to take this position. I don't know.
They don't actually seem to know that there is a protocol around safeguarding, and I know it. And what it is you are proportionate in your response, you are targeted in your response, you are specific in your response. Therefore, you would begin with an email. And you would then follow that up with a second email. And then you would talk about having to bring it to the public sphere because these emails aren't being answered.
Right, exactly.
There's a very definite protocol you follow within safeguarding. You do not engage in pylons if you're safeguarding.
Right.
Okay. She's like equating a bunch of different shit. If you're safeguarding a child, right, or a victim of some kind of something, the worst thing you could do would be to go online and start talking about it and sharing details about it. That's irrelevant in this case because the thing that happened was an online thing to start with. And again, like, safeguarding is designed for like private, vulnerable settings, like in a school, in a therapist office, in a doctor's office. That's where safeguarding protocols are. She's basically trying to say, we did this stuff online in public in a conference that was chaotic, though no one had control over. And if you really cared about us doing the right thing, you would have done it in private. This is giving again, like the 1950s domestic violence thing of like, you know, what happens behind closed doors, like, don't make it public because that makes us look bad, blah, blah, blah. Like, Carol brought this thing up. Yeah, that's other thing. Thank you. Jail Setterbaum says that she appears to be confusing individual cases with systems. Yeah. So Carol brought this up, which I know a couple of lesbians who had this issue, not recently, but quite a while ago. Specifically when there was like some really misogynistic male detransitioners that she was involved with. Carol says, this was after the Phil thing. I emailed her and said very nicely how I was concerned about promoting AGP dudes and how these same men have been very harmful to lesbians in our community. A lot of lesbians I know emailed Gen Spect about this because they were like, how can you say that you're here to support all detransitioners, including the young lesbians who've been victimized by sexually predatory AGP men, when you're constantly promoting sexually predatory AGP men? Carol goes on, I also asked why Gen Spect has ignored all the detrans that they asked to join. Yes, they've taken a handful who they think give them good PR, and they've ignored everyone else. And a lot of the detransitioners I know who asked them for like support in different ways have been ignored. I mean, like I said, I've not been around recently, so maybe that's changed, but yeah. Or I know that they've asked detransitioners to like take on positions where they would do a lot of work, and then they like started doing the work and then they like ghosted. Like there's been a lot of weird shit where it's like they really seem to be using detransitioners. I also inquired what they were doing for detrans, and I saw that they had some things I thought were unprofessional. Yeah, like just a lot of really sketchy shit. As someone who's been around detrans advocacy and organizing for like almost a decade myself, a lot of the things they do seem really sketch. Exactly.
Right.
That's not the protocol to follow. So these were people who were definitely, openly and overtly breaking safeguarding protocol, telling me about safeguarding. And so the issue that people had with the photo was that Phil, even though he identified as man, used the toilets, male toilets, and used he, him pronouns, and followed an awful lot of the gender critical diktat.
Right.
He broke convention because he wore a dress. Now, some people saw that as platforming his.
I just want to ask, was the main issue with Phil the fact that he wore a dress? What was the main thing you saw people talking about in reference to this Phil guy? Was it the fact that he was wearing a dress?
Fetish. I.e., if you're an autogynephile, which he is, he's a self-identified autogynephile. If you're an autogynephile, you have a paraphilia. And that means an erotic kind of a fixation about seeing yourself as a woman.
Yeah.
When my film first came out in 2018, I had quite a few, because I often spoke in the national media in Ireland, quite a few very friendly media who wanted to talk to me in a very good faith way, but they refused to discuss autogynephilia because it had been successfully denigrated as a controversial term that journalists couldn't use.
They almost deny that it's even real.
They deny
right?
it exists. Yeah. Trans activists pretend it doesn't exist,
right.
and successfully pretend it doesn't exist, even though it's in the DSM, which is considered the Bible for anybody who.
Before I address what she's actually saying right now, so obviously there is a subset of women who, if they see a man wearing a dress in, like, you know, the gender critical sphere of the internet, will flip their shit and be like, men shouldn't be wearing dresses, all that kind of stuff. I'll go back to it in a second, jail. But as far as I understand the internet, which I think is fairly decently, that wouldn't have a lot of staying power. That's the kind of thing that everybody flips out for like 2 days and then kind of move on to the next thing. I assume that there's more substance to why women don't like this man than the fact that he wore a dress, because there's been so many fucking AGPs around the gender critical sphere, you know, your Debbie Haytons and etc. That I don't think the fact that a man was wearing a dress would be like the biggest, most controversial thing. Beansprout says, Gen Spect promoted his book on Twitter. People pointed out that he wrote AGP was a sexual orientation along with some other things, and they eventually removed it, admitting they hadn't read the book. Carol says it was because he was actively engaging in his fetish in public. How is this different than a dude in a puppy mask these folks go off about? Yeah, very much agree. That makes more sense to me. Sarah says, it's been months. And they're still flipping their shit about it. Okay. Well, yeah. Well, like on this channel, things are not usually black and white. Some women agree, some women disagree. Depends who you're following online, whatever. Okay. Yes. So, this DSM is the Bible thing. That's what I would like to address next.
Works in psychotherapy. A controversial term that journalists couldn't use. Media who wanted to talk to me in a very good faith way, but they refused to discuss autogynephilia because it had been successfully denigrated as a controversial term that journalists couldn't use.
They almost deny that it's even
they
real.
They deny
right?
it exists. Yeah. Trans activists pretend it doesn't exist.
Right.
And
journalists won't use it. Trans activists deny it exists. These are two different groups of people.
Successfully pretend it doesn't exist, even though it's in the DSM, which is considered the Bible for anybody who works in psychology. It's where all the diagnoses are. It's in the.
Isn't there like a movement within psychology right now that moves beyond like diagnosis of specific disorders into like a more I'm tired. Into a more like behavior-based approach to psychology. She's acting like it's completely black and white. Also, the DSM is fallible. That's why they keep fucking revising it every, like, aren't we on like the DSM 6 or 7 or something at this point? JL says the latest version of the DSM contains plain falsehoods such as assigned sex at birth, proverbial Bible, my ass, literal Bible, as in a book of fairy tales, perhaps. Very true. Beansprout says, which she knows about psychology, if you can make the argument and convince people to include something or change diagnosis, that's how the DSM is written, every version, LOL. Yeah. JL says there's also sub-movements. Okay, yeah, whatever. My point is that she's acting like it's uncontested. Like, everybody agrees. The DSM is the be-all and end-all of everything. And also, dude, this fucking camera, will you focus, please? Oh, I'm gonna try the ceiling thing. No. I don't know. The camera won't focus. There are a lot of feminists who contest most mental disorders when applied to women because they believe the entire field of psychiatry is patriarchal and is built upon denying the reality of women's experiences in the world and the understandable response to that reality, right? So instead of seeing a woman who's traumatized, they see a woman who has like a psychiatric disorder that could be treated with medication and behavioral therapy rather than, so I'm just saying the entire concept of the DSM is not taken as fact by an entire subset of radical feminists. So, like, again, it's just insane. Oh, there goes
DSM as a paraphilia, but the trans activist has successfully suppressed the concept of autogynephilia. So we've all heard of pedophilia. We've heard of frotteurism, which is that when a man rubs up against a woman in trains and buses and stuff. We've heard of exhibition disorder. These are all different paraphilias that, frankly, men have. Women don't seem to. You lot. And it's a small section of men have horrible sexual disorders which impact the rest of society. And autogynephilia is one of them, which is...
Who have horrible sexual... Like, she's making them sound like victims. Oh, those poor men who are constantly sexually assaulting schoolgirls on subways. Oh, my heart just goes out to them.
Is wanting to be a woman or having a fixation that you are a woman. And so the fact that these people exist, these men with these paraphilias, makes society difficult, because what happens if a pedophile goes into a swimming pool? What right. does society do about that?
Yeah.
There's somebody I know, and she worked in this very right-on woke clinic in Canada. She's a psychotherapist. And a guy there had a fetish about hands, and she used to see him see him watching her hands as she was typing. And I was like, did you not say anything? She said, there's nothing.
Haha. This is something that happened in this woman's workplace? Is this not sexual harassment? Ha ha ha.
Thing we could do, like, it was very woke. And I was like,
Right.
yeah, we have an issue in society that some men have a fetish about feet, they have a fetish about a lot of things.
Right.
And how do we operate in society with the fact that there are men, I was on the tube today, there are men having, not only men, but mostly men, secret sex thoughts that are pretty vile.
Yeah.
And there is nothing we can do about it.
Yeah.
You guys remember how, like, at the beginning, towards the beginning of the video, like 6 minutes in or something, she was like, when I use preferred sex pronouns, it's because I'm enlightened and I don't need to differentiate between the sexes so much. And those stupid radical feminists or gender criticals or the gender critical feminists or whatever group she was trying to equate with each other, they're so obsessed with the differences between the sexes, are always thinking about the differences between the sexes. Now she's like, oh, you know, all of these men who are sex obsessed and constantly thinking, really discussing things about women, you know, it's just the way the world is. I thought you said that sex is kind of irrelevant because you're like a liberal and not a feminist. And yet you're conceding this. It seems to me like you are making an argument for why sex is extremely relevant in society when you're saying that you can't avoid these men and that it's men who are doing this.
Yeah.
And so the big issue with Gen Spect putting out this photo of an autogynephile with a detransitioner was the fact that we were, quote unquote, platforming
Mm.
an
They kept saying
autogynephile.
you were selling his book and promoting
We weren't
him.
selling his book.
Right.
He brought his book,
Yeah.
and he sold his book, you know. And somebody, one of the great speakers who's a philosopher called Alex Byrne, he promoted the book in his talk, and he's perfectly entitled to do it. He said it's worth it. Now, there's very few books on autogynephilia. I'm really, really glad Phil Lilly has written his book on autogynephilia. There are very few books about autogynephilia, and we need them. We need loads of them. We need 10, 20.
There are quite a few books on autogynephilia by psychologists, psychotherapists, psychiatrists. Not tons, but enough that if you want to know about it, you can go find one that's by someone who isn't writing about their personal thoughts on their own fetish. I think about what's that fucking guy's name? The guy who's in the military who like had a psychotic break and like dug up his own, James Shoup. Do you guys remember the James Shoup articles where he would explain his autogynephilia? And they were like completely unhinged and like read kind of like sexual fantasies mixed in with like psychoanalysis. Like it's almost like he wrote like, this is my sexual fantasy, and then he like sprinkled some psychoanalysis in it, and he probably got like aroused because he knew women were reading these things that he wrote, right? Is that the best way to learn about AGP? Is it a desperately needed thing, this book? Maple says, too long didn't read. Men want to fuck everything. Yeah, you don't need to pay money for this guy to know that. JL says, we need more books by men who rub themselves on strangers on trains. Without these books, women would never be able to understand the psyche of men who are perverts, who don't give a fuck about us and objectify us.
50. Some people would argue, people who are...
She said she's not promoting the book. Sarah says Stella had the book on her website. Yeah. So yet again, she's like, we didn't do anything wrong. Here's all my justifications for why we did this thing. Can't have it both ways. It's really reminding me of my mother in a not good way.
Very pro-suppressing thought, suppressing speech, suppressing people. They would say, no, we should not platform the book. We should suppress all references to autogynephilia. And I'm just like...
Okay, again, she's acting like radical feminists have like an institutional power to control the freedom of press or some shit. The problem people had was that this organization, which purports to support detransitioners, specifically including detransitioned women, who are often the victims of sexual trauma enacted by autogynephilic men, was that they were promoting the sexual actions of autogynephilic men while saying that they support detransitioned women, which is obviously incomprehensible. They're not saying no one should ever talk about it. They're saying, how can you be the ones saying this is important and talking about this while you're trying to say that you support the people who are traumatized and repulsed by this? Carol says she twists words just as bad as the TRAs. Very much fucking agree.
It'll just go toxic. It will go underground.
Yeah.
Do they not know anything about how society works? If we suppress autogynephilia, it will just go underground and it will be more powerful and more toxic as a result.
Right.
Well, I think this guy is self-identified. He speaks about it freely. We need people to speak about this, because I would say if I went out into London today and did a quick poll, most people haven't heard about autogynephilia. They don't know what it is, and therefore they don't know what they're talking.
Are you ready for what I'm about to say? I'm kind of with Posey Parker and Karen Davis and shit on this. You don't need to know what is autogynephilia. Which edition of the DSM did it come out in? Which year was it accepted by psychiatrists as a thing? Which year was psychiatrists starting to reject it as a concept? And when did the TRAs decide it was an offensive thing? Why do some people think autogynephilia is real and some people don't? You don't need to know any of this shit. All you need to know is that when there's a man who wants to go into a woman's space and is getting sexually aroused, that's not okay. You don't need to know all the intricacies of AGP to give a shit about this and understand that, like, when women say no because they don't want a man who thinks he's a woman involved with them, there's a chance it could be sexually motivated, and when women say no, it should be respected. End of story. You don't need to know all the details about what AGP is. Like, she's really fucking, like, just...
Talking about, like, I didn't.
Yeah.
Back in 2018, when I first interviewed Debbie Hayton, I didn't know that we...
This is like my be-all and end-all of when I was done with Gen Spect. I was kind of casually observing them when they started platforming these detrans men who were, like, wildly misogynistic, wildly lesbophobic, like saying shit like, you know, about women getting raped and, like, how that's what made them transition and shit. And I know that there were detrans women, like, reading these threads, reading these things being retweeted by Gen Spect. This is what was my final fucking line with them. Carol says, I have led a support group for detrans lesbians, and so many were assaulted by autogynephilic dudes saying that they were lesbians. I have no patience for this. Yes. No patience. No fucking patience. Either you want to support the detrans lesbians or you don't. At the end of the day, what I think the case is Gen Spect is following the money. Who has money? I think that a lot of, because the way our society has shame associated with emasculation, I think that a lot of parents of boys are willing to spend money at Gen Spect to help their boys. And I think a lot of parents of girls are not as involved with them transitioning, or they're more likely to think it's a phase that's, like, undoable or something. I'm not sure exactly, but it just seems to me like there are more parents of boys who are willing to spend their money at Gen Spect. So Gen Spect obviously is marketing towards those parents. And the result is that they're necessarily alienating detrans women and girls, right? And they don't give a fuck because that's not where the money seems to be. I mean, I don't know many detrans women who've had the money for a therapist. I know a bunch who've been homeless, you know? Like, I really think that's all this is. They're following the money, and it means, like, deprioritizing women and lesbians, which is not at all surprising because women and lesbians, you know, they're not the ones having lots of extra money to spend, or, you know, parents spending money on them as much. And that's it, really. Like, she didn't give a fuck about women and lesbians.
We should have been talking about autogynephilia.
Right.
We need to change that. We need public awareness about it.
Yeah, and so Kelly ended up sharing this photo with Phil and Laura and making it kind of go viral. And then she thinks she's holding the line, as you say. She's doing this because she does want to protect women. Obviously, that's obviously her motive. I think it's a bit too far. But if we could imagine what she was thinking, and actually you've talked to her about that. Why do you think she posted, and what do you think her goal was in sort of raising a fuss about the whole thing?
I think her goal was to highlight the fact that she holds the line. I think the line she was holding was that she believes autogynephiles shouldn't be platformed, I think.
Why is she acting like the motives and agenda of Posey Parker are unknowable? I haven't seen any of her shit in like a year, and I can tell you right fucking now. She thinks the normalization and acceptance of men with sexual fetishes to act like women and pretend they're women or whatever the fuck is not okay. And that's that. And if women are uncomfortable with it, they should be able to say no, and that's that. Why is she acting like this is some kind of mystery?
We weren't platforming, we took a photo, but, you know, arguably I get the point, fair enough. I think it didn't fall in with Kelly J and Standing for Women's premise, because they are in parks with loudspeakers saying that they let women speak, as you know, let women speak is the hashtag. And they argue that they don't seem to be allowed to speak anywhere, while our conference was defying that because we were speaking.
Her position is that the Kelly J is calling out AGPs. Is she one of those people who uses the term woman face? Whatever. She's calling out these dudes left, right, center, daily, all the fucking time. But in this particular instance, the only reason Kelly J called out this dude was because she was jealous of this conference. Now, a multi-day conference with all of these high-profile people whose names I recognize is obviously not the same thing, but Kelly J has gone on like world tours to do shit in lots of different places, and she's got lots of attention and got lots of money. I don't think that Kelly J is suffering from not getting enough attention and is jealous that you guys got attention. Just outlandish.
And we were speaking freely, and we were filming it, and we...
Breenso says, why is she so obsessed with Kelly J? She's trying to position herself as having just as much attention and authority as Kelly J, and I don't think that's true.
We're holding a conference, so we weren't with a megaphone on a park, and we weren't fighting with activists. So
she's like, we didn't have to fight with the activists. Kelly J has said on multiple occasions that she likes being in opposition to the activists because it makes them look reasonable. It makes the activists look insane. It's like on purpose. It's an intentional tactic that she employs. She's like, we didn't have to do that because we were lucky enough to have this conference, which, based on who was there, was really funded by the right. Like, regardless of who is a client of Gen Spect and who's paying them for therapy type things. Clearly the people who attended the conference were a bunch of right-wingers who wanted to see these people speak, right? Or libertarian types or whatever.
Our existence was really threatening the Let Women Speak existence because we were successfully operating. I don't think that was conducive to where Let Women Speak operates. So I'd imagine that was annoying. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sure she doesn't give a fuck.
Certainly the main issue was having anything to do with autogynephilia and autogynephiles.
Yes.
That was what was really, really enraging for an awful lot of women.
Benjamin Boyce, who we all know and love, hosted a conversation between you and Kelly. And if I were in your position, I probably wouldn't have wanted to do that. I don't think that I would have. And the reason is because I don't know if I thought your exchange was useful, and I think, you know, I read some of the comments, and some people were like, "Oh, this is good," but a lot of people were still on the same kind of bandwagon, saying, "Oh, it's too late."
Okay, well, I apologize about my fucking camera. It keeps going out of focus. Do you remember at the beginning, or I don't know, like a third of the way through the video, they were like, these people with black and white thinking who can't interact with people who don't agree with them because they're dogmatic. Now he's saying that for her to talk to people who disagree with her was like some kind of brave, you know, groundbreaking thing that she did, that she probably shouldn't have done because it wasn't safe for her. Or what the fuck, bro? Either you're part of the like special snowflake crowd who can't handle talking to people who don't agree with you, or you're not. this, like, hello?
You know, damage is done. I don't know what damage, but they're basically just going off on you. You know, obviously a lot of what we try to do is with Peter and Reed, and we go around and we try to engage people in conversation, see why they believe what they believe, you know, see what it would take to change their mind. But in certain circumstances, like the time that we were at Portland State University, and I wrote on the board, there are only two genders, and we were playing this critical thinking game. People could agree or disagree with that, and we got mobbed.
There are only two genders? Dude, way to show that you're uninformed. There are only two sexes. You're not a genderist. I mean, you're not gender critical if you're using that kind of language. You're just clueless.
We got, you know, flipped off and yelled at by these, you know, professors and students, these social workers, God help us all. And then they came down and were just, you know, preaching to us about their whole gender thing. And Peter tried to engage them, but I don't know that I don't know that that's useful for those individuals. I don't know that any of them would change their mind. What I thought was useful about that was other people being able to see the kind of madness that creeps into people's brains and takes.
Also, Beansprout says the Gen Spect conference was $125 to stream online. General admission, which I assume she means like general admission in person, was $525, which that is pretty insane. Thank you so much, Kai, for your money. I really appreciate it. I literally forgot I had super chats enabled. Okay, so what's he doing here now? He's trying at this fucking camera, man. Focus. No. Oh. It's kind of focused more. Maybe I should turn down the definition of the camera before I start the stream. This won't happen as much. Okay, there, I'm focused. So he's saying when I tried talking to the TRAs, they couldn't handle what I had to say to them, and they tried to convert me to their way of thinking. And he's saying this as like an allegory for her trying to talk to Posey Parker. You shouldn't bother trying to talk to them because they're dogmatic and they can't understand alternate points of view. And there was no point talking to them because they, just like the TRAs, can only handle one way of thinking and they'll try to convert you to that way of thinking. As Stella O'Malley pointed out early in the video, she hasn't thought this through very much. A lot of trans activists haven't thought this through very much. You know who has thought this through quite a bit? Even though I don't like her that much, I think we can all fucking agree, Posey Parker has thought a fucking lot about this issue. And if she thinks something, it's probably for a good fucking reason. Eliza is saying it's an outlandish amount of money. I thought it was $900 for all 3 days in person and $175 for all 3 days online. That is fucking insane. Oh, okay. JL says TRS can't talk to anyone. The fact that they're crazy doesn't make you sane. Yeah. Okay, actually, I need to get caffeine. I'll be back in like 40 seconds or something. BRB. Actually, I'm going to go to the washroom too. I'll be back in 60 seconds. I apologize for lying to you. To be fair, I got a snack, ran downstairs, got more caffeine, and then I went to the washroom. So I think I did pretty all right for taking 3 minutes. This is my sugar-free Jell-O. I have been saving it for a special moment because it's so fucking expensive. Dude, a pack of Jell-O should not cost more than $2. This sugar-free Jell-O, the pack of Jell-O, cost me $4.50, and it made 4 of these portions. Next time I go to the US, I'm gonna go to Walmart and fucking buy like 50 packs of sugar-free Jell-O. This shit is so much more cheap in the US. Okay, let's keep going. I sent you the link to the PDF of the conference schedule in Discord. Oh, thanks, bro. Okay, let's watch this. I'm gonna look on my phone at the Discord. Thank you.
Told and makes it so that you can't have a real conversation with a certain contingent of people. I do think it's really good to try to talk to people and see if they're willing to change their minds, see if they're open to dialogue. But and I'm not saying that the killing necessarily falls into this category, but there are certain people in this contingent that clearly don't want to have a good faith dialogue, and they clearly it's just a waste of time ultimately to talk to some of these people, which I've found. I mean, it's especially a waste of time online, obviously, just text based. But I'm just curious what you think about that, because I think well, what is the solution here? Do you? And I don't want to deplatform these people, but I don't want to necessarily give them a platform either.
Again, with this idea that disagreeing with someone is equivalent to deplatforming them. Like, shut the fuck up. You're not that important.
I don't know. It's a tricky problem, and I'm just kind of curious what you.
I'll tell you what, like ever since the film came out, that was November 2018, I've been smeared by the same people, and they've lied about me. And they've said that I want to transition children, that this was a very elaborate way for me to transition children. I was a double agent, that I was a paedophile enabler. Some really pretty scurrilous. These are from gender criticals, and that I, various Dick Pander was a big one, and kind of pandering that, and as
I've never even heard of that one.
yeah, that was back in the day, 2018, because apparently I was pandering to the mighty cock or something.
Jesus Christ. Oh, that's what those people said on Twitter the other day. So Julie, you send it to me. Julie Bendel and Kathleen Stock were in a photo with a trans woman, and they say, "Oh, look at they're cowering to men."
Cowering.
They were all smiling in a photograph.
And Kathleen Stock and Julie Bendel don't cower.
No, of course not.
Yeah. So it's the very same thing by saying that Julie Bendel and Kathleen Stock are cowering to a man is the same as poor Laura, right, in the photo with Phil Lilly, which is the same as poor Stephanie in the film with Debbie Hayton.
Right.
Yeah, like this is not about the video, but I did actually buy a ticket to Philia, and I was planning on going. But then after my summer of spending all my time on women's lands, and also I was like sick a bunch in the spring, so I couldn't work for like several weeks. I just couldn't afford to go. So next Philia, I will absolutely go. I will start pre-planning like a year in advance and start saving up money. I just kept being like, I'll figure it out. I couldn't figure it out. So I will be at the next Philia. You have a good night, Natasha. Something else you guys are saying?
None of those were true. Kathleen Stock, Julie Bindel, Laura the detransitioner, or Stephanie Hayton.
Okay, yeah. So this whole thing of like they're strong, independent women who can make their own decisions. Obviously, they can. Remember at the most of you probably don't remember because you weren't here. At the very beginning of this video, I said I feel comfortable making this video criticizing Stella. And one of the reasons I feel comfortable making this video is because I do not associate with men on any social media. I block them. I don't talk to them. This makes me like almost invisible to a huge subset of the gender critical community, like the gender critical sphere of the internet. There are very few women who will consistently keep track of what I'm up to because I'm such a man hater. People like Kathleen Stock and Julie Bindel, I'm not going to say I know why they do what they do or what they're thinking, but I'm almost certain that a lot of these women associate with men to whichever degree they do because they know it makes them more like politically accessible to straight women, makes them more acceptable in mainstream, that they do have men around them, that they're like, men are a problem, but not that guy. So I'm not saying I know that that's why they're doing it, but I'm sure that if they didn't do it, they would have a different impact in mainstream media, to different access to mainstream media. So I'm just saying, I think that what she's saying is irrelevant to that. And at the same time, this whole like women are so strong that like anytime they choose to associate with men, it's like because they wanted to, and it's probably a positive thing. And like we shouldn't diminish. This is like liberal feminism. When a woman made a choice, therefore it was a good thing because the woman made the choice. That's not how the fucking world works in a patriarchal power structure. Okay.
Debbie's like, none of them are cowering, weak women, and it's really offensive.
So if you want to have boundaries against a man, it means you're a weak woman.
To say that, it's really, really offensive. But the reason why I went on the film with Kelly J, also known as Pussy Parker, with Benjamin Boyce, was because there was a mob. There was a mob online that were gathering a huge amount of steam. And we had done an amazing conference, and we released this extraordinary document, which is the Gender Framework, which is a very heavyweight document that offered a non-medicalized approach to gender, that prioritized sex before gender identity, that had, very well thought out framework, the first of its kind, that could be used as legal kind of opinion if needed. And it was all being overshadowed by people who hadn't attended the conference. It was really, really noticeable that people who attended the conference were very mostly saying, you're missing the main agenda here. What actually happened was something very powerful around platforming different voices that were critical of gender ideology. And I felt I needed to try and stop this mob. I wrote an article to try and stop it, and that didn't stop it. And then I thought, well, for 5 years, I've been smeared. I've been the subject of a smear campaign by the very same people that lie about me, and that I wanted to take it on. I wanted to say, well then, Kelly J, your supporters have been consistently smearing and lying about me for many years.
I don't understand how she can be so arrogant to think that she's so important and yet, like, diminish herself to the level of thinking that these online spats are like so fucking important. They clearly didn't stop you from having your conference. They clearly haven't stopped you from having people donate money to your organization. Like, why are you acting like it's such an important big deal?
And I wanted to there's an expression in Ireland, throw the dead dog on the table. Let's go at it. And I'm glad I did, because it stopped the mob.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
good.
It very definitely stopped the mob. It stopped that insane Twitter storm pretty much immediately. It went from madness to not madness. So as soon as it went out, it stopped. And from then on, conversation has been a good deal more reflective. There's always the lunatic fringe on both sides that will never be moved. I'm not interested in them. I don't care about them.
Yeah.
But the larger middle certainly calmed down.
Right. No, that totally makes sense. And that reminds me of something John McWhorter said in his book, Woke Racism, about the what he calls the elect, the people who, like the Ta-Nehisi Coates or the Ibram Kendis or the Robin DiAngelos, or they're true believers. Those people aren't going to be reasoned with, unfortunately. And I think some of us have a hard time accepting that because we're so interested in epistemology and getting people to change their minds. But the reality is it's actually a waste of time to engage them too much. And as John says in the book, you have to just move past those people, because the majority of the people actually will change their mind. Most people are moderate, right? They're not on this sort of lunatic fringe. But it is depressing to find the same kind of dogmatism and the same closed-mindedness in this group that we would otherwise
Can
agree
I just
with.
say, if it was just dogmatism and closed-minded, it would be disappointing. The fact is, I have without a doubt encountered many liars.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, liars and misrepresentation. It's not just, it's lying and cheating, and it's slimy.
Yeah.
It's way beyond dogmatism.
I would say the dogma.
Because you know who's never lied about anything? Stella O'Malley.
leads them to think that their ideology is so pure and so good that they have to then cross the line.
There is, but there's definitely the dogmatists.
Yeah.
And
Okay, so I've looked at like the ad or whatever, this like the program for the convention that I just got sent, and dude, the people involved are so sketch. Like so sketch. There's not a single person on there that I would recommend for a detransitioner to listen to their work or read their work or trust their advice. And the detransitioners who are involved are some of the most heavily handled and isolated detransitioners that I've ever been able to contact. Like they have handlers. Like they're just yeah. The entire thing is extremely suspicious to me. I want to know about their funding.
in their defense, they have the courage of their convictions. Yeah,
Sure.
fair enough. There's others in that group.
Yeah.
And some of them are just online troublemakers
Sure.
who would arguably have very unhappy lives
Yeah.
and who have very little to be doing. And they often describe themselves as in the trenches. And I'm like, in the trenches in Twitter? Like, really?
I agree that Twitter is not real life, but also there's no denying that there are a bunch of like, and I'm saying this as someone who has a lot of issues with Posey Parker and what she does. A lot of the women there are a bunch of women who go to her events who have been like fired, like teenage girls in high school who had to like change schools because of the stuff that they've said. Like a lot of those women are like working class women who've had like real negative impacts in their life for being vocally gender critical. I thought that she was the one who like women are strong and independent and can make their own choices, and now she's like, what are you even doing? You're useless and nothing happened to you. Dude, like, what the fuck?
As you have a cup of tea and a biscuit, and you're on Twitter and you're in the trenches, like,
Yeah.
do you know? And very, very, very often they don't do anything of value, and they're pretty unnerved and distressed by people who are actually making changes, and it doesn't suit their cause. They would rather stay in the fight. They want the conflict, they want the fight, and they're not interested in resolution. I remember one of them, because I was talking to them by DM, trying to get somewhere, and she said, I'm very comfortable with failure. And I thought, yeah, you are actually. You're very comfortable in the fight with failure, with problems, and you'd probably be very uncomfortable with any success.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Moving things on doesn't suit them because very often they're very, very comfortable in the distress.
I often think about that when I read people's comments. You know, we're doing all this work to try to make these films, or the work that you do, and I see people just leave the most asinine, nasty comments, and I think, and sometimes I just say, "Wow, you know, I feel very sorry for you in your life because it must be really miserable." Or I just
This holier than thou.
Keep up.
This holier than thou is like so insufferable. Like fucking get on with it, please. Like how many? There's been like a minute that they're like, these people don't understand success. Shut up.
The good work.
Yeah. Sometimes I'm funny, but mostly I've been very disappointed.
Yeah.
Like when the film came out in 2018, I was really disappointed because I was like, we could do something really of value here, and it's getting derailed.
Right.
And then after the conference with Phil Lilly, it just felt like all these people, frankly, it was very centered in the UK, none of whom had attended the conference.
Right.
And there was a narrative. And the narrative was, this was bad.
Yeah.
And I just felt there's a higher value that is getting completely dismissed because people want to make sure that they proclaim their intelligence and their well thought outness and their virtue.
Yeah.
And they did. And they did it many times. Lenin, I think, said, Lenin, I think it was Lenin who said, you know, quantity has its own quality. And when you've joined in a pile-on, when you're the first 10 people, fine, you're making points. After that, I wrote a book about bullying, so I know an awful lot about online bullying. I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but I do. Sure. I really studied it. And when you join, when you're the 100th person, you've become part of a pile-on and you need to pull back and think, how do I add to this? And if I need to make a point, maybe I should make it privately and very civilly, or maybe I should watch my timing and think I'll make this in 2 weeks because it's not fair to be part of a public discourse right now to that person.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of the online behavior that we don't seem to have a protocol around, and we need one around. And so all these people making these very, very...
Guys, she wants to govern the internet. We've solved it. Interview over. We'll just need govern the internet. That will solve all the problems.
well thought out videos, and God, did anybody not make a video is what I want to know. But there was an awful lot of videos and essays written about it. And I thought, fine and dandy, but honestly, where are the emails? Where are the...
Shut the fuck up about the emails. What difference would it make if people... Let's say that the conference attendance was 1,000 people and she got 5,000 emails about this fucking photograph. What then? What then? Like, what difference would it make? Would Gen Spect suddenly be like, oh my gosh, all of the like protocols and values that led us to this point were clearly flawed and we're going to change everything about the way we... No. What the fuck with these emails? Nobody gives a fuck. And yes, also some of you are like, I emailed them. So like...
The emails asking me, first of all, for a bit of dialogue, or to Gen Spect.
Right.
You know, they weren't there. They didn't exist.
Right. Did want to dive a little bit more into AGP because Autogynephilia, because I'm very new to that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really talk to anyone in the 20 plus interviews I did about the subject.
Guys, did you hear that? He's done 20 plus interviews to learn about this topic. Clearly, the voice of wisdom.
Partly because it doesn't interest me, because I am focused more on children and families, and it's not super relevant to that.
Oh,
well, I know I'm gonna be crucified for that, but so yeah, you mentioned this problem, like what do you do? And it's interesting. I was talking to Reed about this. Like when Phil Illey showed up, there were trans women who, I don't know how they identify, but men, who do their best to look like women. And interestingly, I have nothing against Phil. I don't know Phil, but it actually did bother me a little bit to see him dressed that way more than the trans. I don't know why exactly. It was just kind of an innate thing that, but again, he didn't do anything creepy. There was no problem. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to take you up on that, because there was trans women there that you did not know were trans women.
Probably.
Well, I'd tell you, there were.
Okay.
And what would you feel if you then found out that there were trans women? You know what I mean? Because they were effectively stealth.
Yeah.
Would you feel a little bit conned by that, if you follow me?
Sure.
And then you could argue, so Phil was blatantly performing his fetish, as they say.
Yeah.
He was wearing his dress. He was not wearing breast forms, as some people lied about online for some reason. He was, a male body wearing a dress.
Right.
And arguably, other males there were performing women face in a much more sexualized manner.
Performing women face? Is she using the feminist language to try to ingratiate herself to them? I don't really understand that. I also just feel like she's equivocating, like, what the fuck is she on about now? So because she's trying to say the gender criticals attacked this dude because he was visibly an AGP, which is like hypocritical of them because they didn't attack the ones that they couldn't see. I don't...
As in with big tits,
right?
With makeup, with very inflated lips.
Okay. Yes.
So they were performing women face in what you could argue was a much more offensive manner.
Yeah.
And in a way, what I would say was your response to Phil Illey, and maybe I'm not sure, but I'll just throw it out there. We humans, we respond to things that are out of order.
Sure.
A hair on my head doesn't bother me. If a hair was on my jumper or on your T-shirt, it would bother me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not offensive until it's out.
But I did know that some of those they're obviously men, but they do pass a little bit better, I suppose. Maybe that's where you're going.
That's my issue.
Yeah.
That you probably took issue with him because he wasn't passing.
Yeah. Well, there is.
Dude, she's acting like she's never fucking met. Okay, these like ultras or whatever. A lot of them I don't understand. She literally was like, wouldn't you be more offended if they passed and then you felt like they had like pulled the wool over your eyes? Wouldn't you be more offended then? And now she's saying that like, bro, you can't have it both ways. Either you're acting ignorant or you're trying to say you know what's going on. You're saying you know what's going on, so you know why they're offended, but also you don't understand why they're like, bro, it's just like fucking talking in circles. Jesus Christ. This is not the way someone who's been around the gender critical sphere of the internet for like 5 years or whatever should be behaving. It's insane.
Just wearing a dress.
There's
He
this-
was actually contravening social norms by that.
that's
So
true.
you're almost arguing.
She's trying to say that the only reason people were unhappy with this man being there was because they are gender traditionalists and she is a liberal, so she's okay with a man wearing a dress. It's just insane.
Arguing yourself into medical transition here.
Well, and what's interesting is so if it is a kind of paraphilia, or if I guess
if it is, dude, she fucking definitely believes in it. I love how he's trying to act like
I don't understand, and again, I know nothing about it, so I'm completely new to this, but it seems odd to me to want to wear it in public if it's something that, you know, gets somebody off privately. Why then wear it in public?
But it might get them off publicly.
I
And
see.
there's a few things to this. I just want
It's
to
so
point,
foreign to me, I guess.
Yeah. I want to point out a few things. With autogynephilia, some autogynephiles, their fetish will be wearing a dress and being perceived as a woman.
I see.
Now, he wasn't being perceived as a woman, and he wasn't trying to be perceived as a woman. And some autogynephiles, for all we know, could have been.
There are so many autogynephiles posting their photos all over fetish sites who would never have one fucking fart in hell of passing. She's trying to say that because he doesn't pass, it doesn't count. Fucking bullshit.
There, or could have been on the train today, and they would be being perceived as a woman, but as an ordinary woman with jeans and a t-shirt. Do you follow me? So there could have been other autogynephiles who are not wearing a dress.
Right.
Dude, this is irrelevant. Whether there were or weren't other autogynephiles there, people had trouble with the fact that you say you support detransitioners, you support, like, you know, people who've been traumatized by sexually predatory AGPs, while you're saying you support sexually predatory AGPs. You can't have it both ways, regardless of whether there was more than one of them. End of story. The whole thing is moot. She's just talking in circles to confuse people.
And so therefore, certain women online wouldn't find that offensive because they're only wearing a t-shirt and jeans, but they're still getting off.
Sure.
So it doesn't even hold water, if you follow me. Why is a dress more sexualized? This wasn't a short dress.
No.
This was just an elaborate. What it was very attention-seeking.
Yeah.
dress.
Noisy. Yeah.
It was noisy. It was loud. You know. I do think that a lot of people would disagree with me. Some people believe that if you have a fetish or a paraphilia, you are always living and breathing your paraphilia. Hence, they believe that if you're a paedophile, all you're ever thinking about is paedophilia. If you're an autogynephile, all you're ever thinking about is autogynephilia.
Guys, have you considered that men who are sexual predators have complex inner lives? Probably not, because you're just a stupid feminist. Thank God Stella O'Malley is here to tell us the truth.
I don't think so. I've met enough of them to know that they can live really decent and responsible lives, people with paraphilias, and that paraphilia is just a section of their life. Now, we've got to understand that the people who went online and who went really mad very often believe that it's taken over their entire life. It's definitely taken over some people's entire life, and all they do is live and breathe.
Yeah.
You know what this reminds me of? This fucking cameraman. Will you focus? I don't know if I need to buy a new one, but this one is like pretty high quality, and it was I thought a fairly like decent investment. It was kind of expensive, but okay, whatever. You know what this is giving? This is giving the trans widows. Like, she's like, well, for you it's a big deal, but like for the rest of society it's not a big deal. Fuck, what was she just saying?
And who went really mad very often believe that it's taken over their entire life. Paraphilia is just a section of their life.
Oh yeah, so okay, remember, well, what year was this? Someone tell me. When I feel like there was like a 2021 or 2022, there became this like kind of huge discourse online, and it kind of forced every single gender critical I guess I should get rid of this hide this comment. Okay. Every single gender critical organization in the UK seems to be forced to take a position on supporting trans widows or not, aka platforming and accepting and having compassion for AGPs or not. And Stella O'Malley and her stupid podcast, well, I don't know, the podcast that she has, which I think a lot of it seems to be stupid. This like pseudo sexology crap, which is actually like anachronistic sexology, which is like they're labeling as like this new sex, so stupid. Seem to be taking the position of, well, they have complex lives and like maybe they're victims of sexual fetish, but you know, even if they've like sexually traumatized their wives and you know, abandoned their children and or forced their children to partake in their fetish, like they're complex people who have thoughts and dreams and feelings and all this bullshit, okay? And I was like, dude, you could literally apply this exact same phrasing and the exact same sentiment to any abuse situation. But because this abuse has to do with this dumb pseudo-sexology that you're constantly spouting, you think you have special authority to excuse it in this situation. Like, it's so fucking stupid. I just am like, it's so transparent to me. Like, just...
We've got to understand that the people who went online and who went really mad very often believe that it's taken over their entire life. It's definitely taken over some people's entire life, and all they do is live and breathe.
Yeah.
And so when they're on the train, they're busy in the middle of, frankly, a fantasy. When they're in a conference, they're in the middle of a fantasy. At all times, they're in the middle of a fantasy. I don't think some people are like that. I think some people have a paraphilia and they've parked it. And my read of Phil's behavior at the conference was that he wasn't in the middle of it. Usually, you know, when...
Well, we have it here, folks. Her official professional opinion of watching this man interact in public and not sitting down and assessing him in any way is that he behaved appropriately. So that's that, I guess.
Well, I should say a male, but certainly I would know when a man is in the middle of a sexual act. So imagine
Okay, but also I love how is she trying to say that this is because she's a professional or because she's like a woman with like female intuition? Because if that's the case, and with all of her bullying background, shouldn't she respect it when other women are saying that their spidey senses are tingling and they're not cool with this? She's dismissing all these women's concerns about this individual man because she thinks that he's okay. Also, the irony. Every time gender critical people, radical feminists are like, we don't want men in the washroom or the shelter or whatever, there's always one fucking woman who's like, but I'm friends with him, or I'm friends with a trans person, and I think that they're safe. So when you like say that, that's like your problem and not my problem. She's doing the exact same fucking thing. Women are saying, this is the line. We don't want them. We don't accept them. We're not okay with them. And she's saying, but I know that he's okay. So trust me when I tell you that, like, this is, I haven't talked about this since last year, but my problem with gender critical trans identified men is that they're all extreme nice guys. What do I mean by that? Well, you know, a lot of sexual predators are a problem, but this one, he's a nice guy. This sexual predator, he's a friend of mine. We go out for coffee. To me, he's emasculated enough to the point where I don't think that he's a threat. And you might not view him that way, but my experience with him is that. So when I tell you that he's a nice guy, you need to trust me that he's a nice guy, because that's what the term nice guy means. I think he's okay, so you need to think he's okay because he hasn't hurt me specifically. Like, this is an extreme nice guy situation. And it's also insane to me the validation that the trans identified men get from the gender critical sphere that accepts them, because they're being told, it's like they're being told that this is the community that like exists solely to band together against all odds, right? against all political divisions, specifically because you are a problem to society, except this individual trans, like Debbie Hayton or Fiona or whoever, is so special and so nice and so honest and so transparent that all of these women have given them the special nice guy pass. It's like, oh my fucking God, it's a man with a penis who has a fetish. End of story. Why are you spending so much fucking energy on this fucking man? Like, who cares? Okay, let's try to make less commentary. Let's get through it.
You can see the face on him. You can see that he's sexualized, if you follow me.
Yeah.
It's off-putting and we all kind of recognize it, if you follow me. That wasn't to be seen, certainly, at the conference. But I think it's quite unmistakable. And I think it's wrong to say that these people are constantly performing their fetish and completely absorbed. Some are, many aren't.
Yeah.
And it's not only wrong, it's dangerous to think that these ordinary blokes that are, you will not see any sign of their paraphilia, and to think, therefore, they don't have a paraphilia. It's so wrong, it's dangerous, I think, to kind of presume that men who have a paraphilia always are absorbed by it.
Right. Yeah. And so then this.
Abusers aren't always abusers. Sometimes they just want to like watch their favorite TV show, kick back with their favorite pair of slippers or whatever. Like, dude, shut the fuck up. Who cares?
Solution that was proposed was like a dress code, right? Which seems a little odd. I mean, for so many reasons, because obviously,
I've also just got to say though, at the end of the day, as a radical as a lesbian separatist, okay, what the people at Gen Spect do is kind of like their fucking problem. I don't really give a fuck what they're doing. Why would a dress code make a difference to me or not? What they're doing over there? At the end of the day, they're blowing smoke up the asses of AGPs, regardless of how they're dressed. I don't know. The whole thing seems really like pointless to me.
Many women show up in what would typically be considered male clothing, right? So do we need to then make all the women wear skirts and dresses? You know?
Oh my God. Okay, I think we're getting into the. I was about to look up something else about because people are like, she's making excuses for grooming or whatever. I was about to look up this like recording of a Twitter space to like link it, but like later. Okay. So this man wrote a book about his auto-heterosexuality, and he admitted, I assume because he's an AGP, he admitted that the way he dresses is part of a sexual fetish, and that it's not just a neutral thing for him to wear women's clothes. I'm not using the term women's clothes because I think dresses are something that women need to wear. I'm using the term women's clothes because if you have a fetish for women's clothes, you have a very clear idea of what women's clothes is, and you target, like you wear it because it's women's clothes to you, okay? If a woman wears, dude, this is like what I was thinking about when I saw the Twitter thing that Isolde put up. I don't know if she's still here. This stream has been like so fucking long. If a woman decides, I'm going to wear pants instead of a skirt, I'm going to wear a loose baggy t-shirt instead of a form-fitting blouse, is she role-playing as a man? Fucking absolutely not. What that woman is doing is she is taking an inaction to perform gender. If I shave my head once every 2 weeks and I never style it and I never straighten it and I never put conditioner in it and I never put a hair mask in it and I never braid it, I never do anything with my hair, am I going out of my way to look like a man? Or am I doing the minimum amount of effort to never have to take any action with my hair? Femininity and female gender roles, when it comes to appearance, are an action, an ongoing action. Plucking your eyebrows, doing your skin masks, doing your makeup, shaving your legs, wearing your form-fitting underwear, wearing the clothes that fits you in the right way to make yourself look curvy, walking in a way that fits with those shoes to make your butt look the best it can look. All of this shit, they are constant actions. Femininity is a constant behavior. It's a constant action. The lack of wearing form-fitting underwear that shows off your cleavage in the right way is not is not pretending to look like a man. For those of you who've been watching my channel, we've been reading Femininity by Susan Brown Miller. She describes femininity in both an aesthetic and a behavior as the the accentuation both of literal things, for example, the female body shape, and of like fantasy things. Those are more to do with like behavior that make the difference between females and males, or masculinity and femininity, more extreme. So it's to go out of your way to look more vulnerable because women are generally less strong than men. It's to go out of your way to look more dependent because in society women are dependent upon men. Femininity is a constant action to emphasize femaleness in the social understanding of what a female is supposed to be in our society. If I'm not going to go out of my way to look dependent, to look helpless, to look like, I'm not going to go out of my way to wear clothes that makes me less mobile. If I'm not going to go out of my way to spend tons of time and money to make myself look aesthetically pleasing to like the beauty standard of the time and place I'm in, that's an inaction. I cannot stress enough how much an inaction is not a sexual role play. This man had to custom make or custom order this fucking dress he's wearing. If a woman rolls out of bed at this conference in the hotel room and throws on a t-shirt and a pair of jeans and doesn't wear anything else, she doesn't do makeup, she doesn't do her hair, she wears like a pair of Converse. Is she role-playing as a man, or is she taking the smallest amount of action possible to put clothes on her body so she's not naked and step out into the world? Like, it's just so fucking stupid. Thank you, Carol. Carol says, I wear men's shirts but women's pants, so only half of me is ever turned on at one time. And what about when you're naked? I guess you can't be turned on then, right? Okay, I'm sorry. This was one of the main things I was thinking when I saw this clip earlier, and I was like, I know that you're not a feminist. I know you don't care about feminism, but you have to understand that when a man goes out of the way to find women's clothes that he considers women's clothes that fit him a certain way, so he can fulfill a certain fantasy, so he can be comfortable fulfilling that fantasy, that is an action toward fulfilling his fetish. When a woman puts on a plain t-shirt and a plain pair of jeans and steps out of the house without trying to look like a certain stereotype or fulfill a certain beauty standard, she is not trying to role play as a man.
It's just so strange.
Well, like women fought very hard for the right to wear trousers. And women fought very hard for the right to kind of wear the clothes that I wear. And I would have gone insane had I been born in other generations and eras. And women's sexuality is very different than men's. So when a woman is turned on, we don't seem to suffer from or experience or have paraphilias. Women have sexual disorders, but we certainly don't seem to impose them upon society the way that men do. But I do know that when a woman is sexualized and gets a sexual kick, it's more all over feeling. It's not as targeted, it's not as specific as an autogynephile. But I do know that a lot of lesbians seem to get a sexual charge for presenting as a man.
Okay, please, in the live chat, thoughts on this. I have many thoughts on this. First of all, I hosted and took part in some workshops for lesbians under 30 talking about sexuality. And when I said sexuality, not sexual orientation, sexual behavior, sexual feelings, sexual desire. Like sexuality is like a verb, right? Okay. And a lot of what we talked about was this feeling of being like an outside observer and double checking, like, are you doing good enough? Are you performing up to the expectations of your partner? And what I think about when I think about a woman who doesn't perform femininity and then I think about her having sex, I think about a woman who has her body hair and is not concerned what her partner is going to think about her body hair. I think about a woman who is not trying to wear makeup and heels in bed so she can be feminine while being naked at the same time. I think about a woman who is, successfully or not, trying to unencumber herself from outside perception, who's trying to engage in sex in a way that is just authentic, that is just her and no extra veneers. Now, I don't think many women are very successful at that. I think it's pretty difficult in our porn-saturated society to really do that. But I can absolutely see a woman who used to engage heavily in femininity, and I don't only mean that in terms of dress, but I mean that in terms of intellect, like the way she saw herself. Like, you know, I need to do XYZ to be attractive. I need to do XYZ to maintain the fiction that this is what I like. You know, like, I think if women are constantly like self-monitoring and then trying to enact that role, I think it makes them disconnected from their body, and definitely when you're disconnected from your body, it inhibits you from having like an enjoyable, relaxed, satisfying sexual experience. So when the first time I heard her say this, my immediate thought was, well, when women are not trying to fulfill a certain role and certain expectations in bed, they probably have better time in bed. Is that role playing as a man? No. I don't know. I don't know. JL says a lot of people turn sexuality the opposite way into gendered role play. Yeah. Sweet Sea Monster says she's just talking out of her ass like always. Very much agree. Cyber says that Stella's anti-feminist. I completely agree with that. Lavender says, why is she always speaking for lesbians? This is what a lot of straight women do when they say that they're not lesbophobic. They just like speak on behalf of lesbians and make proclamations about things they know about us. Because they think it makes them look like they care and they know. When clearly they don't fucking care and they don't fucking know. And by doing this, making up bullshit and saying it's on behalf of lesbians, they can support their insane bullshit while saying that it's us who's supporting them. Now, am I going to say that no lesbian has ever role played? Like, you know, obviously not. Obviously some have. But she's making it sound like she's setting up an equivalence with AGP that is just not fucking there. And also, like, okay, first of all, AGP is a heterosexual thing. Lesbians doing anything in bed is a homosexual thing. So, from the get-go, it's a non-starter. Doesn't work. Right? Among lesbians being gender non-conforming women are disproportionately lesbian, I think. Like, if you picked out the most gender non-conforming women you could find in a given area, most likely a bunch of them would be lesbians. Gender non-conforming men are disproportionately homosexuals. If you go to your way to find gender non-conforming men and you found a few that were straight, they are the anomalies. Lesbians being gender non-conforming are not anomalies motivated by sexual fetish. In actuality, when women degenderize their appearance, like me, GNC-centric, gender non-complying, okay? We are trying to desexualize ourselves and de-objectify ourselves. When a man goes out of the way to go to a fucking fetish shop to find high heels that fit him, that are comfortable for him to wear out in public, he is not going out of his way to desexualize himself. He is doing everything in his power to fulfill a fantasy of sexual objectification. It's just, I know that she's not a feminist. I know that she doesn't understand feminism. But it's like, she put zero fucking thought into this really lesbophobic thing that she said. And I'm not trying to be all like butthurt special snowflake. I just mean like, my problem is like, if you think about it from any fucking angle, it doesn't make any sense. like, well, let's not get too into it, Sabrina, but what I think you're talking about is women who are like extremely disconnected and alienated from their own body, and so that sex for them is not so much a sensual physical experience, but becomes like into like a psychological fantasy while they're in the moment instead of being a physical sensation in the moment. And I think once you're that disconnected from your body, you can get led or you can direct yourself into a lot of really unhealthy sexual practices. I don't think that's the same thing as a visually driven paraphilia like men have. I think it's kind of like the inverse of a paraphilia, actually. Anyway. Carol says she should understand the basics of human sexuality, though, for fuck's sake. Very fucking true. She tried to set this up like she knows, right? Because she said women experience sexuality throughout their whole body. Are you talking about like how women have sensual zones all over their body and men don't as much? Are you talking about how for women sexual arousal is like a holistic experience that has to do with like their emotional state, their physical state, and for men it's more visual and like automatic? Like, what was she referring to? I don't know. OMG Spiky, what's up? But yeah, I don't fucking know. Also, I need to do less commentary because it is 11 p.m. I have been up since 4:30 p.m. and I did both jobs today and I streamed today. So like I really need to do less commentary and get this done with because I'm kind of falling asleep. Okay, more caffeine.
And they wear very male clothes. So where are they fitting in with this business, Atara? Are they not allowed into conferences?
Right.
It's very male performing women.
I think they would, certain people have said something.
Male performing women. Again, as if a woman's lack of putting on makeup is a performance like a man.
Something like, well, you know, men don't need to be protected. It's the women that need to be protected. Therefore, we have to police the clothing that the men wear.
And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that would be the response, I would think.
Yeah.
Remember how at the beginning she was like, I'm a traditional liberal? And then also she was like, this idea of women's clothes. She mentioned that at some point. She kept trying to basically be like, I don't believe in gender. Like, I'm beyond that. Now, the way that she's talking about lesbians wearing men's clothes, she clearly has a very specific idea of what men's clothes is, and she takes it as a given that we all agree on what that is. I don't agree on what that is. I don't think there's a concept of men's and women's clothes. You're the one who's like giving credence to this bullshit.
But again, that, as you pointed out with specifically Julie and Kathleen, and that's always been my problem with a certain part of feminism is what Christina Hoff Sommers calls fainting couch feminism. So we have to protect women all the time from their own choices. And
oh my god, this fucking bullshit. We have to protect women from their choices, like they're so weak. Again, I know neither of you are feminists. I mean, obviously this is a fucking scrote, so. But choice feminism is not the benchmark of feminism. Choice feminism, for those of you who don't know, is the concept that anytime a woman makes a choice, she is doing a feminism, and that is what feminism is. So, for example, if a woman makes a choice to engage in stripping, even if it's detrimental to her in many different ways, you know, in the now and in the future, right? And even if the only reason she was able to make that choice was because we live in a patriarchal power structure where women's sexuality and bodies are objectified, none of the context or the impact is relevant. Only the fact that she made the choice is what's feminism. Radical feminists do not believe this. They believe that the motivations that led you to this choice should be analyzed. The ability to make this choice should be, for example, like if women, you know, were stuck between a lot of bad options and they made a choice. For example, like back in the day, you know, You could be a husband, you could be an old maid, or you could be a prostitute, and there was the only choices, or a nun. Those are the only choices for a woman. Okay? Why did the woman make that choice? Because in society, like, why did you make the choice? What in your background and upbringing led you to thinking that was making a good choice? What are the impacts that choice has on you? What are the impacts that choice has on women around you? That is radical feminism. Well, not all of it, but that's a part of radical feminism. Why are women in the positions that we're in? Why do we have the options that we have? And what are the impacts of the choices we could make based on those options? Okay? These fucking people, if a woman makes a choice, we should respect that because agency and nothing else matters. Acting like a woman might make a choice that could hurt her or hurt the women around her, that's to say that women are weak and stupid. That's not what we're saying. We're not saying women are weak and stupid. We're saying that women live in a patriarchal society, and that should be taken into account when we analyze why they're doing what they're doing and how it impacts them and the other women around them. That does not mean that we think women are weak and stupid. You are fucking stupid. Okay, enough said.
It is very patronizing. It's very
Offensive.
It's very offensive. It seems to me to just be, especially if it's coming from a man, it is actually sexist to think that, well, I need to do, X, Y, and Z. And I'm not, I'm for a more traditional masculine role. I do think it's good to protect women generally, but I don't think that I need to protect them from them.
Oh my God, aren't you all shocked? Aren't you all shocked that the scrote is being a fucking scrote? Who could have predicted?
Themselves or make decisions for them or anything like that. And that just seems, very insulting.
Yeah, I also think that a lot of people's issue was performing any sort of sexual act in public was the issue. And as opposed to just protecting women, it was also just that this was a sexualized act. I don't think it was.
Yeah.
I think this is he's a circus trainer, he's an attention seeker.
Yeah.
And
fucking yeah. Why seeking the attention? For sexual gratification. If he's not getting aroused now, I'm sure he's gonna go home later and jerk off about it. But according to Stella, she judged that at the conference, while she was busy doing conference things, obviously, she also was able to observe and judge that he was not doing anything inappropriate.
Lots of people wear clothes that are very attention-seeking. I personally don't take issue with people wearing, for want of a better phrase, gender non-conforming clothes. I don't take issue with that.
Yeah.
I think we have to choose our battles in life.
Right.
And I'm very fixated on certain battles. Hasty medicalization, childhood medicalization, inappropriate medicalization. They I am willing to die on the hill of.
Yeah.
While other people have other battles, which is fine. But why destroy your closest ally when there are...
Your closest ally, you have fundamentally misunderstood or are intentionally miscommunicating your understanding, like lying to us, that radical feminists or even random women who are not feminists who are critical of AGPs and want nothing to do with them view these men as our allies. A lot of us view them as like infiltrators who are trying to fuck shit up, as evidenced by this bullshit.
Serious enemies we have in common that are actually winning.
Yeah.
And that was what was so incredibly disappointing. Not that we disagree, it's fine to disagree.
Right.
But why go...
Is it fine to disagree because you seem to think there's no context in which someone can disagree with you without directly trying to sabotage you or stop you from accomplishing your aims?
For us and derail a very important conference, and they did.
Yeah. Touching on something you said a little bit earlier. So I showed the first episode of my series.
Oh, yeah.
And for the most part, it was well
very
received.
Good. Yeah.
Thank you. And the people I was sitting next to really liked it, and most of the people I talked to really, really liked it. It got a standing ovation, so it's clearly...
It was very powerful.
Thank you. And
has anyone seen this guy's shit? Is he the next Benjamin Boyce? Like, what is it? What's up?
Yet, one of the first questions, we did a Q&A afterwards, and one of the first questions was something to the effect of, how do we get people who are on the fence, who don't already agree with us, to kind of move more in the direction of wanting to protect children, and et cetera. And I said, well, one of the ways we do that, I'm always thinking about, okay, the friends that I have, the progressive friends in Portland, how do I talk to them about this issue? And so every time I have a whole series on woke ideology, and now this series on trans issues, I'm thinking, who would they listen to? Unfortunately, you kind of have to play this identity politics game to some degree.
Unfortunately, you need to consider identity politics when speaking to someone who prioritizes identity politics. Did you know? We never thought about it. We're stupid feminists. We never thought about that.
Because when I'm thinking about like, how do I move the needle? How do I help people who maybe are on the fence or who kind of believe in this stuff a little bit? And I thought, well, Buck is a great advocate
Oh my God.
for pushing against the gender ideology, but Buck is.
And may I say, your inclusion of Buck was very similar to our inclusion of Debbie Hayton.
Okay.
A trans woman, trans man, who actually has a very thoughtful position.
Right. And that was the whole reason. I thought, wow, I love listening to Buck. Buck is very passionate. We certainly don't agree on everything. I don't think anyone's really.
I have many reasons I dislike both Debbie Hayton and Buck Angel. But you know what? I am absolutely certain that the motivations for a lesbian to transition to being a man and being in porn for like 2 decades are vastly different than the motivations of a married family man who's a school teacher to transition into a fetish. Why is she equivocating with words? Why is she trying to set up an equivalence between them? Because she's trying to like defang the severity of what she did with Debbie Hayton.
Truly trans, I assume that after talking to many therapists and many people that probably maybe everyone could potentially get out of their gender distress with the right help. That's my assumption. So, Buck and I disagree on some things, but who cares?
Yeah, also, fundamentally, Debbie Hayton has had like one position on things and stuck to it for a long time. Buck is extremely unstable in her beliefs and statements.
But I was just, so that question came up, how do we get people sort of on our side more, so to speak, and I mentioned, that's why I included Buck and people that I may not fully agree with, but that may help.
You know what I think is interesting about this too? So a lot of the times, if you are coming from a materialist perspective and you're saying like, statistically XYZ, socially, we developed these protocols because XYZ. If you're trying to come from an empirical perspective, why sex roles are more important in society than gender identity. And you're talking to somebody who believes in gender identity, like he's saying, how do you convince these people? They can't really hear what you have to say because they're relying on emotion, right? He is saying we should also rely on emotion. Because if we bring up a real human person, instead of discussing the impact on women, the impact on children, the impact on society negatively, if we bring up an individual person and tie emotions to it, we'll be able to change their minds. And I'm not saying that that's a good or a bad tactic to take. I just think it's interesting that basically throughout this entire thing, they've been like shitting on social justice warrior tactics and using these dog whistles to be like, the rad femmes are basically SJWs and they're all weak and stupid. And then he's advocating this, which is a social justice warrior tactic, which is to play on emotion rather than logic to get someone to agree with you by humanizing it instead of giving like a logical explanation for something.
The more progressive or slightly woke people stop and think about these things. And then the very next question was from some woman who holds up Buck's porn and shows everybody and says, did you know that Buck does porn? And I was like, well, I do know that, and I don't see how that's relevant. I mean, Buck mentions it in the film, but only passingly. Like, not everyone likes what I do or who I am, but I want to coexist with people. And I thought that's what we should all be aiming for, right? But apparently this woman, she was very unhappy with my response, which was just that I'm trying to move the needle here and get more people to listen. And she went out, I found out later, she went out into the hallway and showed everyone else Buck's porn. So she did way more to promote Buck's porn than I will ever do. and I assume she's on the sort of gender critical side, but then I had conservative Christians coming up to me afterwards saying like, oh, this is a very powerful film, but you really need to consider removing Buck from the film. But Buck is a key part of the film. And other people, as I was walking down the hallway, I kept getting stopped and I was trying to go get some food. And people were like, oh, you need to re-edit that. You need to interview somebody else. And I'm thinking, how dare you? Like, do you want to give me $6,000 so I can fly somebody else here and do another interview? So it was both like, I was elated because a lot of people really liked it and people were very genuinely complimenting it. And then other people were just like, oh, you need to just change the whole thing. And then even people, I have a Locals, which is where people can pay to support my work and see interviews. And my interview with you actually on Locals, I got someone who was trying to educate me about this stuff, educate me about a subject that I'm making.
I agree with all of what you're saying about this the emotional strategy or whatever, which is also like so fucking strange to me that Stella is doing this thing where she acts stupid even though she's been around for like 4 or 5 years because she knows like what does and doesn't work at this point. And also just shows me that this guy is like a fucking pleb. Like,
a documentary on, which I thought was ridiculous. They shared the picture of Phil Illy. They said, "Oh, you know, Stella's problematic because of X, Y, and Z." And I just was like, "What is even happening here?" It's just.
Well, I tell you what's happening. The French Revolution is happening. You know what I mean? Where the people eat themselves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They turn on each other and they become more and more pure and purer and purer.
Right.
It has happened in history many times over.
Yeah.
And it's really depressing, and it's part of humanity, and we see it again and again. And
this thing that Carol just said brings me back to like the thesis of this whole fucking live stream, which is she started off by being like, I don't understand these people who get mad at me when my actions and words are inconsistent. AKA, how can I say that sex matters and then also use preferred pronouns and say that sex doesn't matter because I'm too smart to care if sex matters. Yes, Carol. Inconsistency is the problem. Inconsistency is why you're facing criticism. I'm not saying you should just do whatever people on the internet tell you to do, obviously. But you can't be inconsistent and then be like, I don't understand why people don't understand it. Like, just, like what?
It is very self-destructive.
Yeah.
And it's definitely, there's a contingent of people who've been hurt by men and who are very, very triggered by various aspects of men, and they are allowing that hurt to be an overriding kind of reason to speak about.
So women are strong and they can make whatever choices they want and they can do whatever they want. However, if you're a woman who's been hurt by a man, you need to stop letting that control you because that's weak. Thanks, Stella.
People or to censor people or to police people. And it's incredibly destructive because we've got to learn to coexist. We've got to learn a better way forward.
Why? No, we don't. You literally were a few minutes ago were saying they're our biggest allies, so we shouldn't alienate them. Now you're saying we need to learn to coexist. Why would we need to learn to coexist with people who are our allies? Learning to coexist with someone implies that you have to overcome something to get along with them. Maybe if we didn't have to overcome shit to get along with men and we could just focus on doing other shit, we would have more energy to do our shit and spend less energy on handling these men and their stupid fucking feelings and monitoring these fucking fetishists to keep ourselves and our other fellow women safe. Have you considered, you know?
Right. But those people that were complaining about Buck, I don't think that has anything to do with being hurt by men when it comes to Buck. So the reasoning that I was given by a number of people, even some of the people that I interviewed for the film, were saying something to the effect of Buck encourages young girls to transition, which I don't really understand.
Yeah, because you're fucking new here, bro. I cannot believe that he is like an authority making a fucking podcast or some shit. He has no idea what the fuck he's talking about. So I'm gonna give you 2 main reasons I don't like Buck. I'll preface this by saying that Buck is a very traumatized, mentally unstable woman. So, you know. First of all, Buck is the reason that TIFF porn is the way it is now. It used to be that when you were trans and you were young and you were trying to access medical care, this is before it was as accessible as it is now, the thing to do for trans-identified men, for trannies, for, you know, for men, for like whatever you call them in porn, for them, the thing to do was to get involved in like prostitution or porn. That was the way it was seen as a cultural. Janet Mock and several high-profile trans-identified men have talked about this, how it was basically seen as a cultural rite of passage among trans-identifying men to get involved in the sex industry, okay? Buck Angel was the woman who transferred that rite of passage from being a male-exclusive experience to being both for men and women. Buck Angel is the reason that so many TIFs suddenly wanted to get into porn. They thought, you know, being sexualized as a masculinized woman doesn't really work, right? Like, if you just think about it, like, it doesn't make sense, like, from a heterosexual perspective. Buck proved that you can do it. And she went on to say, it's a great fucking thing you should do. Look how much made my life amazing. I'm so empowered. I have all this money and agency that I didn't used to have, all thanks to porn. There was a huge movement of trans-identifying females suddenly involved in cam work and porn and prostitution to a degree, but less so, because they were inspired by Buck Angel to go out and try it because they thought that, like, her success was replicable. And so many fucking trans-identified females are sexually traumatized directly as a result of trying to follow in Buck's footsteps. This is one reason I don't like Buck. Buck is so fucking traumatized, at least from what I've seen, that I don't think she's in a place to recognize how horrible she's fucked up her life, or if she has, she's in like a state of denial. So she's still propagating this thing. Like, now she's saying that she's so successful in porn, she doesn't have to do it anymore. She like directs porn and sells sex toys. Like, she's, you know, leveled up in her success of porn. This fucking camera, focus. Whatever. Another reason I don't like Buck. I'm not sure in recent history if this is true, but historically, Buck will post a GIF of porn that she's in one tweet, and the next tweet she'll be talking to some 14-year-old from Mexico who's trying to get access to hormones. She'll be posting a link to her newest sex toy in one tweet, and the next tweet she'll be talking to, I don't know, some 18-year-old who just started an OnlyFans, okay? This, to me, is grooming. The normalization of sexually mature behavior, knowledge, products to minors is grooming. This is very, very normal behavior among the trans community. I grew up around all of these people online who are my friends. As a teenager, 14, 15, 16 years old. All of them were in cam work. All of them had blogs and vlogs, reviewing sex toys. These are the people that I was friends with. Like, one tweet, I'm like, yeah, I finally tried that new thing at McDonald's. It's great. The next tweet, it's like a GIF of them doing porn. This was my standard everyday life as a teenager, a trans teenager on the internet. Buck is part of that culture. Buck normalizes that culture. I'm not fucking okay with that. I don't care what the gender criticals, if they think that he's like, she. I don't care if the gender criticals think that she is like a great tool because of like her position within the community or how valid she is because she's been around for so long. I don't give a fuck. There is no excuse for normalizing medical transition to children because like now they're like, oh, well, now she says like kids shouldn't transition. Dude, she has said both things many times. Her position is inconsistent. There's no excuse for normalizing trans-identifying females getting into porn and the sex industry in general. And there's no excuse for normalizing children getting involved with and getting comfortable with the sexual exploitation industry and medical transition generally. These are two things that Buck has done that I think are unforgivable. And she shows very little signs of changing that behavior. You know? So that's my thoughts on Buck. I don't care what the fuck she has to say about anything else. Yes, exactly. Carol, I've said this many times. Carol says it's possible to be a victim and a perpetrator. A cult requires that you propagate the good work. Exactly. Fucking exactly. Yeah, exactly this. Okay. Yeah.
I think they think through like osmosis or something, like Buck is an icon and therefore young girls are going to look up to Buck and want to. I don't really.
There's one
get
other
it.
thing. They would think, like, in fairness, Buck does not encourage children.
This is like when Abigail Schreier wrote her book and she like did this whole deep dive chapter on one fucking trans YouTuber and was like, this is the state of trans things on the internet. And you're like, that is not fucking accurate because you don't know what you're talking about because you haven't been around long enough and you don't have a global perspective on things. These clowns have not been around long enough and have not researched widely enough and do not have a historical lens on what the fuck you're talking about. So they're just offhandedly saying that's not true. Because by the time you got here, it was already normalized for TIFs to be doing all this shit. And also, maybe Buck has cleaned up her image a little bit on Twitter and stopped interacting with children on the same account that she's doing porn stuff on. But I can guarantee you that she did that for like 10... I personally interacted with Buck when I was a trans teenager in between the porn gifts and the sex toy gifts. Like, it's completely normal. So you can just say it doesn't happen because you are not paying attention and not looking for it.
To transition.
Very much against it. Yeah.
But he seems to believe in true trans. I don't know Buck as well. He does, and that is problematic.
Yeah.
I certainly don't. But I think we need to talk to people who do.
Sure.
And discuss it. I think people's premise a lot would be around Buck does porn damages women, therefore Buck is part of a kind of an industry that damages women.
But they were literally saying
that's another thing is that Buck is often held up as like, you know, they do this like little testing all the time where they'll be like, look at this picture. You're a straight woman. Are you attracted to this person? And then they'll be like, yes. Like, well, newsflash, that person used to be a woman. So you're agreeing that trans-identified females can pass, and that just because someone was born a woman doesn't mean that they have to stay a woman. Like they do it like that whole like gotcha thing. Buck is like the gotcha TIFF. Buck was like the TIFF, exactly what you're saying, Maple, that was like proof that women can transition and 100% pass. Buck is such an anomaly. Like, such an anomaly. I think it has to do basically with like a lot to do with her genes, first of all, the shape of her skull and the shape of her hips and waist. Because like I've met TIFFs who have like full beards and who their voices sound pretty good, not like T voices. And like they just don't fucking pass because like their body shape is wrong. Like Buck is an anomaly, but like a lot of us saw him and we're like, well, if it's possible for her, it's possible for us.
That Buck by I don't know, I guess Buck's very existence will encourage young girls to transition. So it's even outside of the the porn. Yeah, and I just don't.
The only reason that they think Buck is such an important tool in like changing people's minds is because she already has a high profile. Like you can't.
I don't see the logical
They think
steps.
that I know. Well, I've heard them say it that these young women look to Buck as somebody to model or emulate, and they think that's damaging. Talk about heads you lose, tails you lose. Like
right.
There's no way forward. I think all I've can do is because I've consistently met up against people. If people behave in a really derogatory manner, you just have to move on and just move away from them and just.
If only that was the start and end of this fucking stupid interview. People don't agree with me. You just have to move on. If only that could have been what Stella did in this situation.
Up for the good people and
yeah.
But it's really disappointing.
Yeah. Well, it's a mixed message to kind of end on, but I think that's true. I think, you know, for the people who are willing to, I mean, again, we don't all have to agree, but for the people who are willing to talk and push for, you know, trying not to medicalize children, pushing against that, trying to keep women's only spaces and frankly men's only spaces according to the sexes.
Men's
you know,
only
I think
spaces.
That's good. And then there are those people who can't be reasoned with.
Could I just say one thing at the end? I've watched many people be attacked online. Like, you know, I've seen people like.
It's not just about me. I'm a hero for the people.
like, Jane Claire Jones and Women's Place UK, and, just recently Julie Bindel, but Kathleen Stock has had.
This is also a clip that I saw where I was like, You're equivalent, like trying to set up an equivalence between all of these women and their experiences and yourself. Let's start the list over again.
Be attacked online. Like, I've seen people like, Jane Claire Jones and Women's Place UK, and, just recently Julie Bindel, but Kathleen Stock has had a really hard time, all from our own side.
Is she trying to say that it's the KJK fans who are attacking her exclusively and that she's on the same side as Women's Place UK and Julie Bindel and Jane Claire Jones? Yeah. But that's why I'm bringing it up, Spiky. I think that she's trying to like throw all of these names who are like in slightly different positions into this to try to like muddy the waters and be like, all of them are being attacked for different reasons, but it's like because discourse is bad and bullying is bad.
Julie Bindels had been attacked hugely from our own side. Millie Hill has. Just so many people have been attacked from our own side. I think it's really, really destructive. I think it's created, Debbie Hayton has been vilified to the point of utterly silenced.
Isn't Debbie Hayton publishing a book right now? Are you telling me that, is it the Sunday Times or the Guardian or whoever the fuck was publishing David Hayton's op-eds or editorials or whatever has stopped doing that because of Twitter discourse? Highly unlikely.
Jan Orlander, who you probably don't know, was a brilliant trans woman who used to speak all the time, completely silenced, basically has no voice now. Graham Linehan has.
I can't remember why Fionn left GC Internet Spaces, but he was one of the most like uncontroversial. The thing that I remember about Fionn was I actually remember him getting an insane amount of support. He posted a crowdfunder for I think facial feminization surgery. Oh, he got the chop. Oh, right. Yeah. But he posted a crowdfunder for a specific surgery that he couldn't get covered by the NHS. I think it was facial feminization surgery. But I might be wrong. Some surgery. And tons of women gave him money. All these GCs gave him money. And then in the comments, all of them were like, "You're already more beautiful than I am. Like, you're so much prettier than most girls already. But like, I hope this helps." And I was like, what? And I think that he, unlike most gender critical transes, realized the inconsistency of his actions and his position and decided, it doesn't make much sense for me to be on here advocating for this while I do the opposite. I don't know. JL says another example of why affirmation is disrespectful. Yeah, that whole thing got me really upset with Fionn because I was like, literally there were women tweeting and being like, affirming pronouns and telling people they pass when they don't and all that. It's like hurting someone who's mentally ill. And then they all turned around and were like, Fionn, you're so beautiful and perfect already. And I was like, so do you all fucking hate him or what? You know?
Has been devastated by our own side. Christina Harrison is now out of the game. You probably never heard of them. No. Completely silenced by our own side. Miranda Yardley, another trans woman, completely.
Dude, Miranda Yardley, it didn't. With each of these people, there was like a complex saga that led them. It wasn't just like someone started a manhunt or witch hunt, I mean, and then like, harassed them off the internet. Yeah, Harrison was on a women's sports team. Didn't Yardley... I can't remember all the details. It was complicated. But it's not like one day a bunch of women just decided, like, fuck this dude and started harassing him for no reason. There was, like, complicated shit that happened with each of them. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yardley was banned from Twitter, right? A lot of them were banned from Twitter, yeah.
Silenced by our own side. There has been so many people, groups, organizations, and very thoughtful people who've been trying to raise different perspectives, who have been utterly silenced, that it's a really worrying aspect of the movement, and people should think about what they're doing with this, because it's really destructive.
For sure. Yeah, Miranda was actually here the other day, and I posted a picture with all of us, Peter Bogosian, Miranda, and Julie Bindel. And
what a photo. What an interesting collection of people.
You know, one of the first comments on YouTube was, Miranda's a man, always will be. And I said, well, Miranda knows that Miranda's a man.
Miranda can't say so.
Okay, Miranda Yardley has always maintained that he's a man. So why are you pointing out a comment that he would find unobjectionable? Because you're trying to paint this narrative that he's like hated for no reason, and this is proof of the hate. But if you agree that he's a man and he agrees that he's a man, then how is this demonstrative of the hate that he experiences? My fucking cameraman.
That's without saying he's a man.
Right. It's just, so it's actually retarded, and I mean that quite. I mean that literally.
Ooh, look, he's not a special
one,
snowflake.
It's fucking retarded, and two, it's actually retarded because it's retarding this movement, and I think we just need to stop that.
It's devastating.
Yeah, and my heart goes out to you, because I know you've lost. The first time I interviewed you, you were talking about losing friends on the other side.
Yeah.
You know, people who think, oh, well, we need to transition children, and then you have.
This
So you're
side.
getting hit with both, and it's just
Shot by both sides.
Yeah, it's so those people just got to knock it off.
We'll see.
Dude, this logo. Okay, well. Yeah, we done. I am so fucking exhausted. If you noticed, I started stumbling over my words more and losing my train of thought more. I feel like the last half of this would have had a lot more interconnectivity in my analysis if I wasn't like falling asleep. I think this is my 4th Diet Coke today. I'm trying to stay awake. Should have just made a coffee, but I do have this idea that I'm going to go to sleep now, because I don't think I start work till 10 a.m. tomorrow, so it's kind of a late start for me, but what alcohol? Dude, I don't drink. I'm sober. This fucking sucks. Okay. This guy is so deplatformed. Just the other day, we had him here, backpats all around, to film a video. Like, I think someone like Fiona, I don't think you'd be able to find any contemporary footage or photography of him. And I'm pretty sure he chose to leave the internet. Anybody else, like, they're getting as much attention as they want to be getting. Bean Sprout says, I can't remember the last time I listened to a man talk about this topic for such a long time. Yeah. I have to say, this was less exciting than I thought it would be. I saw those 2 clips, the one about how she was like, all these women have been like harassed off the internet, including all these Tims. And I was like, what? I wanted to see the setup and context for that. It also, I also now understand that she was trying to say, like, basically all of these Tims have been victims of transphobia. Whether she meant to say it like that or not, she basically was saying that. And then trying to say, like me. Like, they are victims of transphobia because these people who have, like, no morals will go after anyone for any reason. Just like me. They'll go after anyone for any reason. It's like, I don't know. And the lesbophobia thing, I thought there'd be more lesbophobia. Where was the 59-minute mark? I don't know. I'm so sorry. JL says it was just kind of sad. It was nice to complain, though. LOL. Yeah. Oh, Toss Stones. Long time no see. Beatrix says your streams are where the real info is shared. Thank you, Traditionalistic. Okay, on that note, I am asking, there's 64 of you watching. I'm sure a bunch of you are hate watchers, but whatever. Even if you're a hate watcher, you can contribute. I'm asking you, is there a video that you think I should do a response to? I agree with you, Lavender. I'm just saying I think she was trying to set that up to kind of be like the bad guy, good guy situation. You know what I mean? Is there a person you think I should do a response to a specific video? Please don't tell me like an entire YouTube channel, okay? Email me, gnccentric@gmail.com, or my Twitter. Message me on Twitter. Send me a link to a video that you think I should do a response to. What I'm going to do is actually pre-schedule that and do it like during the daytime on a day when I don't have as much work, so that I can be more alert. Yeah, that too. She's equating herself to women who have been hounded out of their jobs and punched at events. Very true. That was earlier in the stream, but I mean the interview, but yeah. She also mentioned him. I don't want to get into that. She said Stella is playing the same victim game Linehan does. Yeah, very much. I've sacrificed so much for this community. You all should appreciate me. Somebody else was a little time. Yeah. I just think, like, in general, what are like my main 3 thoughts about this? She kept grouping together people that didn't belong in groups. Like, she started off by saying that these factions don't have beef with each other. She was like, the gender criticals who are feminists, the gender criticals who are not feminists, and the radical feminists are 3 different groups. Then for the rest of the video, she like equivocated them with each other. I think that throughout the video, she would say, what we did was justified. Here's why we can't really be held responsible for what we did. Why should you not be held responsible? Like for example, with the photo, there was other things where she was like, well, we didn't. Oh, the Debbie Hayton thing where she was like, well, the way they edited the video after, like, I didn't know. So like, either you did nothing wrong, or when you did something wrong, it's not really your fault. You can't have both ways. She did that multiple times throughout that. And the last thing was that she kept like either intentionally, like being willfully ignorant, or like genuinely ignorant of being like, I don't know why the feminists think this, or like, I don't know why they care when I do that. And it's like, you do know. You fucking know. You think playing stupid makes you look like a victim, but you've been around long enough that you absolutely know. Someone said this earlier too. You think that I should do a response to that video? I'm down. Send it to me on my email. JL says it was very muddled. Neither of the 2 people knew what they were talking about, but they spoke with great confidence and they always wanted to paint themselves in the best light. Oh, the very last thing that I found so interesting about it was they kept using like terminology to basically be like, we are not the social justice warriors, we're the intellectuals. But a lot of the times it came off as like, we're the neoconservatives or whatever, and they're like the far left weaklings. But then once in a while, their position was like the far left snowflake position, because that's what kind of inevitable when you keep painting yourself as a victim all the time. And then they were like complaining that the GC sphere, the amalgam of GC-ness, was doing a thing that conservatives are often confused. It was strange. They kept like kind of switching sides. It was very interesting to me. Yeah, thank you. This is much more succinct. JL says, it came off as, we're not social justice warriors, except we're social justice warriors to me. Yeah. Those women are hysterical. Oh my god, also the whole thing of like, women have agency, and if you don't think women should make choices that are bad for themselves or for other women, it's because you think women are weak. Dude, like, that's so like, Just so stupid. Anyway, okay. I'm falling asleep. I need to go to sleep. So, I'm going to leave this stream up for a few days. Probably not forever. Because, you know, I kind of kick the hornet's nest, as usual. If you have questions, thoughts, concerns, feelings, email me, gnccentric@gmail.com, or on my Twitter, gnccentric. If you have a video you want me to do reaction to, like, let's full disclosure, I don't watch gender critical YouTube at all, ever. Like, I haven't watched it in like 2 years. And even when I did, it was like one video every 3 months. So I don't know who's making videos about what, who is saying crazy shit, whatever. If you don't send it to me, I'm not going to make a video. I only made this video because Isolt made that thread and I saw it. So send it to me or else the video will not get made. Next reaction video you want. Yes. Okay. Puzzle person, so great to see you. Also, Loriatos, very good to see you here. Just all of you. I know some of you I didn't really address directly, but it's very nice to see you all. Sarah King, I haven't seen you on the channel before, unless I have, but it's good to see you here too. Welcome to the channel. All right. Thank you to all the moderators. I'm not sure if you had to do a lot of moderating. I didn't see a lot of it, but thank you for being here as usual. All right. So I'll see you all next Wednesday at noon Eastern Standard Time, which is 5 p.m. GMT. All right.